just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from the region. And now, war or no war? That is the big question right now. With the possibility of a U.S. attack, the U.S. and Iran may be heading towards talks instead of war. Israel's Channel 12 reports the United States and Iran have quietly informed each other that they are ready to enter negotiations aimed at diffusing the current crisis. A senior American official says President Donald Trump's public calls for a deal are genuine and not a deception ahead of a military strike. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are now working to organize a meeting this week between envoys Steve Witkoff and Iranian officials. The diplomatic push comes as Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. attack would spark a regional war. Take a listen to Trump's comments.
Sir, on Iran, the supreme leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Do you have any response to that, sir?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close. Couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Plus, we now learn that Witkoff is set to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir tomorrow in Israel. Zamir was already in D.C. over the weekend to discuss the situation in Iran. And now the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has officially reopened today for the first time since the May 2024. The crossing has been closed for around 2 years. The pedestrian-only passage is part of a limited reopening under the ceasefire agreement, which came after yesterday's system test at the crossing. Exit from Gaza will be monitored remotely by Israel using facial recognition technology, while entry into Gaza from Egypt will include Israeli security screenings and at the IDF checkpoint. Israel stresses the crossing will not be used for aid or goods. Those deliveries will continue to flow through other Israeli screened routes. And continuing with Gaza, the IDF says a terror operative was killed after crossing the ceasefire line in southern Gaza and posing an immediate threat to Israeli troops. According to the military, several operatives crossed the so-called yellow line and approached IDF soldiers in a suspicious and threatening manner. The IDF says troops identified the danger and opened fire to remove the threat, killing one of the operatives. Palestinian media reported that a 63-year-old man was killed in a drone strike near Rafah on the Israeli-controlled side of the ceasefire line. Nikolai Mladenov, who is the High Representative on the Board of Peace, said he is deeply concerned by the events that have been going on since Friday. These events include both Hamas terrorists emerging from a tunnel in Rafah and Israeli strikes that he said tragically killed also civilians. Mladenov called on all sides to show restraint. Moving to Israel's northern front, the IDF says an airstrike in southern Lebanon killed a senior Hezbollah engineering commander as Israel continues to act against ceasefire violations along the northern border. The IDF says he was involved in rehabilitating Hezbollah's military infrastructure and advancing terror plans against IDF troops. And with us today to break down some of these headlines are Arel Talonblum, who is the Director of Research at the Forum for Foreign Relation, and Or Yisakar, the Director of Research at IDSF. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Arel, if the U.S. and Iran are signaling readiness for talks, what does each side really want right now to avoid war?
Thank you, India. It's actually a very good question. So the Trump administration right now is signaling openness to negotiations with Iran through back channels, as you've said. But it's also simultaneously executing a military buildup in the Gulf. This is a classic coercive diplomacy model. The pressure is applied not necessarily to trigger war, but to get what Trump wants, which is, first off, for Iran to back off on the hostility that it has shown in the past few months. But the credibility of coercive diplomacy depends on three factors. Now, the first one is perceived willingness to act. The second is regional support infrastructure, and the third is actually domestic political backing. And all three, with regards to the Trump administration, are under strain. Now, Trump is facing a lot of pressure from his Gulf partners. In 12th of January, I believe, U.S. Central Command actually established a new air and missile defense system at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Now, that signals that there's operational planning for regional escalation, and it is active. However, Doha maintains exceptionally warm relations with Iran. It acts as a mediator for Washington while preserving leverage via these particular channels with the Iranians. And increasingly, it's actually putting more pressure on Saudi Arabia, largely through fiscal dependence. Saudi Arabia is going broke at the moment, actually. Their mega projects are not working. They have borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, and recently now they're starting to borrow from Qatar. So Riyadh has financial exposure to Qatari liquidity and investment flows, and so that subtly enhances Qatari political influence. So far as the Gulf is concerned, the regime is here to stay, even if they don't like it. And that puts a lot of pressure on Trump, largely because he needs the Gulf in order to accomplish many of his strategic designs in the Middle East, but particularly the Board of Peace Initiative. Iran, right now, it depends what Iran wants. If you consider Iran to be the Islamic Republic, or if you consider Iran to be the people of Iran, those two camps are seriously diverging. And the Islamic regime itself is in a state of strategic incoherence. Nobody really knows what it wants, and it's sort of reverted to its 1979-esque sloganing. Especially with yesterday, it just prescribed every single European Union military arm as a terrorist organization. I don't exactly know how that's going to work out for them. But if Trump is considering foreign intervention, it would be better to act now.
Absolutely. And that leads me to my next question. Or how much of this diplomatic push is about de-escalation, or both sides trying to buy time, in your opinion? Hey, Or, sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you can read it both ways if you are Iran. You can say that Trump is playing both ways, as in, on the one hand, applying pressure, leverage on the Iranian regime by moving all these strategic assets to the region, be it the USS George H.W. Bush, reportedly, that has departed from Norfolk, or is it the USS Abe Lincoln? All these assets, be it destroyers, be it F-15 planes, are meant to signal to the Iranians that the pressure is indeed very real. The Iranians know full well that it takes a lot of time to move the American military, and therefore they can sense that the pressure is real, especially after the 12-day war in June. And so they assess that it is better to approach President Trump with a deal. They even made a statement that it is better for them to, that Iran does not wish to acquire nuclear weapons, and they are ready to make a deal. The only problem is that Iran already made that promise numerous times in the past, and they turn out to be absolutely fallacious. The same goes for the IAEA, who said before the 12-day war that Iran simply ceased to cooperate, and they have absolutely no clue what's going on in the Iranian nuclear facilities. So all these things lead President Trump to, interestingly enough, tie the protest issue with the nuclear issue, and saying, I'm not just here to protect the protesters and possibly lead to regime change in Iran. I'm also here to make a deal on the nuclear file, and I'm open to hearing you. But he seems very determined to bring the Iranian regime to its knees in order to also weaken Russia and China. This is, in the end, the strategic goal behind menacing Iran.
So whether it's through diplomatic means or military means, he's wanting to see the regime on its knees. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, he would like to see the regime on its knees, whether it falls or remains in place, but with changed behavior. And to be honest, this is not an easy pick or an easy call for President Trump, if you will, because after all, destroying a nuclear facility, though it is complex to a large degree, it is far less complex than toppling a regime and to find a whole new infrastructure and organization to replace it. Of course, it's possible, but I don't know if all the elements that face President Trump in these days, when I look at the domestic situation in Iran, if that would incentivize him to strike in Iran and with unclear objectives, or he could take advantage of the situation and the extreme leverage, military leverage, and a credible military threat that he has on the Iranians in order to make some sort of deal on the nuclear file. That seems that he's navigating both ways right now.
And Aral, you touched on something really important that I want to dig a little more into. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are again at the center of mediation. What are their interests? Can you expand on that more?
Of course. Well, it really depends on which country you look at, particularly Qatar. Qatar has a very, very long-standing relationship with Iran, even though they have had their fair share of exchanges in the past, certainly this year when Iran actually bombed Qatar. But Qatar is very intent on the Islamic regime in Iran staying firmly where it is, largely because Qatar relies on things not changing too much in order to maintain the very complex mediation structure that it has over decades cultivated, not only in the Gulf, but also beyond. And Turkey is concerned, even though it has made numerous statements about Iran and has certainly showed considerable hostility towards this regime. Turkey is concerned that the unpredictability of foreign intervention could lead to an even worse situation in Iran than at present, at least considering what Turkey's objectives are, which is neo-Ottomanism and spreading that kind of influence. Egypt is very concerned as well about Iranian influence spreading throughout North Africa. They don't want to risk prolonged war and escalation and have ILGC essentially running all over the place, especially in Tunisia, which is so close and proximal. And so it becomes an alignment of interests, even between these three countries that don't necessarily align on much else, but they certainly have reason to be afraid. And should foreign intervention happen, it would be very much in their best interest for it to be short, rather than to risk prolonged war. Trump as well has this concern. He's facing a credibility trap at the moment. If he escalates war and it becomes prolonged, there's domestic backlash and there's electoral consequences for whoever succeeds him. If he doesn't escalate after signaling force, then he has deterrence credibility that is diminished. And so Trump is really trying to maintain these relations with Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt in particular, but he may not have the bandwidth that he needs to maintain it so long as he continues to break a promise that he very clearly made to Iranian protesters at the beginning of January that help is on the way.
Or from Israel's perspective, are the talks between the U.S. and Iran necessarily a bad outcome, or is it a way to avoid a regional war that would be dragged out?
Right. So Israel would like to see a regime change in Iran. It is just concerned that the price to get there may be at a very high cost for Israel. And the conditions right now in Iran domestically to get to such a point are either or not rife at the moment, but Israel knows that it will be in the direct, within the crosshairs of the Iranian regime. And so it follows closely whatever Trump will decide. But then reaching a deal with Iran would not be a bad thing for Israel. What would be a bad thing is reaching a bad deal with Iran. And I think Trump knows that after 2015, the way he criticized the JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal, he cannot land an extremely bad deal with Iran. He may feel extremely motivated to do so after the 12-day war, because he did participate with Israel in taking down an incredible percentage of Iran's nuclear program. And so there is a real dilemma here, whether the nuclear program itself is the issue or toppling the regime is the issue, because Israel and the US proved that they can deal with the nuclear plan as far as the military reaction is concerned. Trump may be interested in the deal, but he knows that the room for maneuver here is limited unless he pulls that leverage of credible military threat on the Iranian regime.
Aral, Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. strike would trigger a regional war. Is that a deterrent or a signal of how far Iran is willing to escalate?
Both, I would say. It certainly is a diplomatic deterrent in any ongoing negotiations that may occur. But it's also very consistent with the ideology that the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the regime's dominant security actor, has expressed essentially since its founding. Now, this is not status quo power. It's an institutional doctrine, which frames the U.S. as a civilizational adversary. It frames Israel as only deserving of elimination. And conflict is a long-term revolutionary struggle, and it's not simply a dispute to be resolved. My contention is that in the long term, any deal with Iran, as it stands with the current regime, is a bad deal. Now, whether Trump shares that view or not is not particularly relevant here. What matters is that so long as the regime continues to operate in the way that it's operated, with an ideology that espouses destruction of the West and destruction of Jews and Israel, negotiations are simply tactical de-escalation. They're not actually any kind of reconciliation strategically. That Masoud Pezeshkian, who was gloriously referred to as this reformist figure in Iran, is able to declare war essentially multiple times against the United States and the West in the past 2 months alone, just shows where the regime is. It's desperate. It has killed thousands of its own people. It is suffering, at the very least, a PR nightmare, and it's teetering on the edge of economic collapse. It cannot sustain itself for much longer. Trump knows this, and he's trying to force them into a corner. It would be better to squash the bug than to try and corner it. But sometimes, diplomacy doesn't necessarily align with political reality.
And or where do the protests stand as we speak right now?
Well, it depends who you ask, and I think we can unfortunately see some trend of waning of the protests right now in Iran. Certainly to lesser extent than when we had a month ago. We heard of the terrible massacre in the bazaar of the city of Rasht, with hundreds of people butchered by the regime's authorities, as well as really mass arrests on the streets and executions. And some reports even talk about tens of thousands of people being killed by the regime.
Aurel, what would success even look like for talks? Would it be a formal agreement or just a temporary freeze on escalation?
Well, that very much depends who you ask. I mean, even conservative figures in Iran have acknowledged that thousands of people have been killed. They understand exactly what position they are in. They know that the IRGC cannot hold out for much longer deep down. What the regime realistically wants is to be able first to negotiate a deal that gets it out from underneath the economic sanctions that have caused the collapse of so many financial institutions in Iran, for mostly among them Ayande Bank, which was one of the largest private financial institutions, in Iran. And they need the time to recoup. The problem, though, is that this kind of recuperation entails the economic support that is given to proxies, especially Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And so long as like I said, so long as the IRGC is active, the money that they might be able to regenerate is going to continue being redirected to jihadist groups and other proxy militias to destabilize the West and Western allies. So in the long term, as I've said, this regime being around, and I think that many policy analysts will agree, is not at all optimal for continued Western interests in the Middle East. However, they might try and persuade Trump, especially through Qatar, that they are willing to do anything to survive. And that is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or how does Iran's internal situation, including the protests, shape its willingness to negotiate right now? Oh, or you're muted. I think you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Amazing.
Great. We're back.
Right, we're back. So, look, I mean, to the largest degree possible, Iran would not have come to the table if it weren't for the protests. There is a serious level of anxiety and panic and concern among the highest echelons of the Iranian regime as to the effect of these protests on the very survival of the regime. Foreign Minister Arakchi gave an interview to CNN where he flatly denied, and he said that there is no existential threat, and there were a few terrorist elements, and there were at first some peaceful protests on the street, but then they were amplified by some terrorist elements directed by Israel and the United States. Well, of course, he will blame foreign and Western actors, but the truth of the matter is that the regime is extremely panicked, and as high-level officials in the U.S. said, they are in their weakest point since the 1979 revolution. And the question is, what will the Ayatollahs choose to do? And I would say that without the Trump factor here, or an involvement by the United States, the regime would find it extremely easy, unfortunately, but extremely easy to tackle protests, because there's a fundamental imbalance between unarmed, peaceful protesters and a regime coming with tanks and automatic firearms. So all of these things are extremely well, let's say they are on the table for President Trump. I'm sure that it is the main driver that make him put a foot forward and demand the regime to stop. But then somehow it morphed into, I want to talk about the nuclear file. And I'm suspecting that Trump here is attempting to get the best out of a bad situation for the regime. He essentially ties the U.S. treatment of the Iranian regime and its treatment to protesters to the U.S. treatment of the nuclear file. And it is extremely interesting to see what's going to happen in the coming days. We were several nights already, I think, we're on the verge of an all-out war between Israel and Iran and the United States. And now it seems like the protests are waning, the Trump is more inclined to talk, and the Iranians themselves, given their extremely dire situation, are also ready to talk.
Aral, we know that Iran in previous nuclear negotiations and agreements they've made, they haven't followed them. What would make any sort of new nuclear agreements something that they would follow realistically?
It's difficult to say, largely because the last time there was a nuclear agreement, the IRGC disabled the cameras that were being used to monitor any potential enrichment. And we know what the ultimate consequences of that was, which was military intervention in Iran to target their nuclear facilities. Again, the best deal that Iran can get is one that, or at least the Islamic regime in Iran can get, is one that allows them to recover economically while funneling all of this money not to the Iranian people, but to their own ideological designs, which are proxy militias, terrorism, and again, nuclear development. These are issues that are simply intransigent for the regime. They cannot help but build up security for what they can, for what is an eliminationist, ideology that will simply be sustained so long as this regime is in power. And as Aura has said, the regime has shown that it is able to engage in very brutal crackdowns of protesters. Future protest mobilizations themselves are no longer, I believe, in the future going to depend on economic concerns, but actually perceived international mobilization against the regime, especially against symbolic figures at this point right now, like Ali Khamenei. But it's going to be very, very difficult for the Iranian people in the coming years. The regime considers them responsible for the sheer embarrassment that it has suffered on the international stage since June of 2025. The Iranian people will be paying the price as the IRGC continues to shore up its defenses against a perceived threat that exists really in their minds.
Or if talks do fail, do you see a strike option still on the table?
Absolutely, and I think that President Trump is being presented all the options. Israel is also, I believe, in direct contact with its American partners. And as we said, credible military threat is indeed a viable tool in the hands of President Trump, as opposed to other administrations who preferred to speak otherwise. I remember President Obama, even in May 2015, 2 months before the signing of the JCPOA with Iran, he said, well, we all know that the military option is not realistic. And so essentially, he took a major leverage off the U.S. in the course of the talks. And so Trump already saw the success of the Israeli kinetic capabilities of the Mossad internal warfare capabilities. Its ability to completely neutralize the Iranian air defenses. It's the Israeli Air Force capability of striking with precision and really dominating the skies of Iran, that is some 2,000 kilometers away from its base. So all of these things are showing the president that indeed it's a show of force by the United States that is the last resort after intense attempts to engage in diplomatic negotiations. But yet again, as Aurel said, the very notion of reconciliation for the regime is non-existent. They would happily use the occasion in order to give themselves some technical benefits, especially the removal of economic sanctions. But they would never, under any circumstance, give up on their very fundamentalist ambitions. Otherwise, the regime has no raison d'etre, has no right to exist. And so I believe that the Iranians will want to get some sort of reconciliation from the president. Question is if he will be willing to listen to them or prefer a short-term gain and give the protesters some chance to flood the streets once again.
Aurel, thank you so much for breaking down the situation. You've both brilliantly explained what's going on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, India.
Finally, for some more exciting news, the Portland Trail Blazers star Deni Avdija has become the first Israeli ever selected to the NBA All-Star Game. It's a milestone moment for Israeli sports. The 25-year-old forward, who grew up on a kibbutz in northern Israel, was named a Western Conference All-Star reserve after a breakout season that put him among the NBA's elite. Around the league, superstars, including LeBron James, have praised his rise. Back home, fans across Israel are celebrating a dream achieved. Here's what Deni Avdija said about all his excitement.
How much you work, how much pride are you feeling with this honor?
I'm proud, and I just remember all the journey that I came a long way. I wasn't in the easiest situations throughout my career. I started playing basketball without a dream and pursue it and just see wherever it takes me. And it's hard to believe that you just accomplish thing after thing after thing. It's just it's just emotional for me for sure. Yeah.
With us now to share more about this historic moment in Israeli sports is ILTV's Devo Klein. Devo, thank you for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, India.
Devo, what does this moment mean for Israel?
You're right, India. It's really just a big moment. I can't explain to our viewers enough how tuned in Israelis have been in the NBA season this year because of Deni Avdija. This is not something that Israelis usually watch. The main sport here is actually soccer. And if they're going to watch basketball, it's going to be the local basketball. But thousands of Israelis have been tuning in just to watch Avdija play. And millions have been voting as well in this all-star vote. He accumulated, if I'm not wrong, just shy of 2 million votes. And I wouldn't be surprised if many of those were Israeli. We're completely backing him here in Israel, and we're super excited that he made this achievement.
Wow, that is so impressive. And how important is Israel representation in the international sports arena these days?
It's crucial. It's so needed. And it's honestly, India, it's so inspiring to see. It gives a lot of Israelis, especially young basketball players here in Israel, it gives them inspiration. And it says, well, if he can do it, I can do it. He comes from very humble beginnings, and including in the NBA, by the way. He was incredibly overlooked when he was playing for the Washington Wizards, which is where he started his NBA career. Ever since moving to the Portland Trail Blazers, he's been a trailblazer, literally. He's been a captain and a leader for his team on and off of the court. And it's so inspiring to see. And he's inspiring not just people across the globe, but especially in Israel who look up to him. He's been representing Israel. He's been combating anti-Semitism, which he unfortunately has suffered a lot of. And he's doing an incredible job. And we're completely rooting for him here.
And one last quick question. When is this All-Star game, and will you be watching?
I'm not sure yet if I'll be watching. It's soon. It's around the corner. I don't have the exact date, but it's actually a combination of a few games. They've changed their format in recent years. It's not going to be just one All-Star game. It's going to be kind of like a tournament style thing. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, in a few months.
Wonderful. Thank you, Devo, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And before we go for now, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel, breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen to join. And as today is the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, we at ILTV wish you a happy holiday. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali. Thanks for watching, and Chag Sameach.
ILTV Security Brief. I'm Kalev Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. Amid a buildup of U.S. forces in the region, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Boyd Cooper meets in Israel with IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir to coordinate ahead of a possible strike against the Iranian regime. Iranian officials threaten all-out war if attacked. Zamir says the IDF is ready to strike back if attacked. The IDF recovers the remains of Master Sergeant Ron Gvili, killed during the October 7th attack, and the last remaining Israeli hostage held in Gaza. Acting on an intelligence tip, the IDF discovered him buried in a Muslim cemetery after doing forensic tests on over 200 bodies exhumed from the site. Israel agrees to the reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt after the recovery of Ron Gvili's body. As phase 2 of the U.S. peace agreement advances, clashes continue in Gaza between Israeli forces and terrorist infiltrators, and the IDF demolishes terrorist infrastructure in the Strip, including a 4-kilometer-long terror tunnel. In a series of airstrikes across South Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley, the IDF destroys Hezbollah weapons storage and production facilities and terrorist infrastructure built in violation of the agreement between Israel and the Lebanese governments. The IDF also eliminates 2 Hezbollah terrorists, Muhammad al-Husseini, the organization's artillery chief in Arazan village, and Jihad Bassam, responsible for weapons production in Bir al-Sanasir. And now, our big story. With the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike group now in Mideast waters, the U.S. military can be said to be locked and loaded for a potential operation against the Iranian regime. Israel, too, is preparing itself for possible retaliation if that happens. Still, President Trump this week offered the regime, if not an olive branch, certainly an off-ramp from confrontation, saying he's still willing to negotiate, a strategy some of his key advisors are said to favor. But the Tehran regime, at least publicly, remains defiant. As the estimated death toll among the protesters gunned down on the streets continues to rise in the tens of thousands, the Ayatollah security forces are dragging the wounded out of hospital beds for retribution. And Iranian officials say they are ready to respond if Trump finally pulls the trigger.
در مورد این که ما چگونه واکنش نشون خواهیم داد خیلی روشن هست. ما همونطور که قبلا هم نشون دادیم در برابر هر تعرضی، در برابر هر تهدیدی به صورت قاطع و با تمام توان و فراگیر حتما پاسخ خواهیم داد. در مورد جزئیاتش قاعدتاً نه اینجا جاش هست و نه وظیفه تخصص بنده است که صحبت کنم. نیروهای مسلح ما به خوبی یاد گرفتند که چگونه از حریم ایران دفاع بکنند. جمهوری اسلامی ایران هم نسبت به توانمندی‌های خودش اطمینان داره، هم تجربه‌های قبلی از جمله تجربه نبرد قهرمانانه خرداد ماه رو در ذهن داره. توانمندتر از هر زمانی قطعاً به هر گونه تعرضی پاسخی فراگیر و پشیمان کننده خواهد داد.
And joining us in studio for more is Iran and Middle East expert Catherine Perez-Shakdam, and also executive director for We Believe in Israel, and Ambassador Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., now chairman of the Silver Road Capital Group. Catherine, let me start with you. The forces are in place. What do the Iranian people expect now from the U.S., hope for, and realistically, what do you think is going to take place?
Iranians are waiting for President Trump to act. They need him to act. They have been dying in the streets. Children are being shot dead in the streets of Tehran and across the country. This is not sustainable. People need help. They are crying out for freedom. President Trump say locked and loaded. We're waiting.
Right. And Ambassador Ayalon, Danny, President Trump, we know he will not hesitate to use action, but he also does like to negotiate, perhaps prefers it. Reports coming out just now of maybe some sort of, I'd say, secret talks or talks that Israel, for example, is not even part of or being necessarily updated on. What's your sense of whether it's going to be shooting or talking here?
Yeah. Well, Kalev, there are three good reasons for Trump to, make good on his threats. First of all, his own reputation and keeping up United States deterrence. Secondly, he locked himself into specific threats repeatedly. So if he backs down now, that is going to be very bad, not just for the United States, but its allies. And all those evil forces can come out of the woodwork, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, anywhere else. And I think also something which is very important is the scope of the carnage, which is just now is being discovered day by day. Also, another good reason for him to do it is not just the expectation, rightly so, of the Iranian people, is to exact a price from the Ayatollah's regime. With the scope of the carnage, if there is no action, kinetic, serious military action by the United States, that is, we invite the next carnage very soon. So I think this, if I have to assume or assess right now, the chances for a military action outweigh not doing anything unless, Kalev, and this is very, very important, unless, and we know that feverishly Iran is trying to negotiate, but we should not, or Trump should not repeat the mistake of Obama in 2015. That means if there is negotiation, absolutely on American terms, and that is total capitulations, no more enrichment of uranium on Iranian soil, dismantling the missiles systems, and of course, no helping and assisting the proxies of Iran throughout the Middle East and the world.
Right. And Catherine, you know the regime better than most. Is there that kind of flexibility? We know there's public defiance, but from the Ayatollah and others, is there any kind of flexibility of the type that Danny's talking about?
No, look, this regime needs to go. It has to go. It's an abomination unto the world. They have committed crimes against humanity. Let's remember this. Not just against our people, the Jewish people in Israel, but the rest of the world too. Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iranians themselves. Now, the notion that we would want to negotiate with evil, I disagree. Look, if we don't do it now, if we don't cut the head of the Hydra, we're going to have the same conversation in 20 years, 50 years. It's going to get worse.
Right. But the head of the Hydra, I mean, a lot of talk about whatever the action the U.S. takes, would it be enough to topple the regime, even if it took out the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei? What's your assessment?
Not enough. I mean, of course, he has to go because he represents the top of the pyramid. But he's sustained by a system, the RSJC. They need to go. You need to cut off at least enough of the top of the pyramid that the middle will literally collapse. A lot of the people, by the nature of the regime, the way it's architected, are not there because they believe in the ideologies, because they've been locked into it. And I refer quite often to a form of enslavement, that of the mind and the body. 90 million people find themselves colonized by an ideology that is not their own and a faith that doesn't resemble their own. That's important to understand. Now, if we want to be thorough, and we need to be thorough, we're going to have to address the issue of Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood. Both Sunni radicalism and Shia radicalism walk hand in hand, and they have told us to tell that they are two separate entities when they don't connect at the very top. They do. They work together. I give you Hamas.
Yeah, well, let's leave Hamas let's leave that because we're going to get to Gaza in a bit. But Danny, if we're looking at the kind of thorough operation Catherine is talking about, of course, Israel is going to get pulled into that, even if it doesn't want to. It's certainly Iran is going to target Israel. Is the country ready for that kind of potentially sustained conflict over a period of time, if it means the possibility of toppling the regime or certainly weakening it to the point that it's not an existential threat?
Yes, if indeed this regime will, put everything out, and they feel now an existential threat, and rightly so, they will engage the entire Middle East, and they are threatening not only on Israel but also on other American allies, be it the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, and this is where this other political factor that weighs in, because of the threats of Iran, we see a major diplomatic effort led by Qatar, which is an ally of Iran, unfortunately, to dissuade the American from a military operation, claiming that this would bring a chaos not only to the region but to the entire world. The destruction of all the oil facilities, which means oil prices are going to jack sky high, and a lot of casualties around the world, of course, blocking the Hormuz waterway and many other things. But this is where leadership is needed. With all due respect to all the threats from Iran, which are being embellished and being promoted by those countries, mainly Qatar, I believe that once an operation is starting, then the capabilities of the United States in terms of intelligence, electronic warfare, and of course all the other facilities and capabilities that they have, including, of course, what Israel has, I don't think that they will have any chance for Iranians to really wreak too much havoc in the region.
Right. And Catherine, if you, for example, the top and even the middle leadership of the Ayatollah's regime were taken out, the question is if in those lower levels, in the military level, outside of, for example, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, there are people, Iranians, that are going to be willing to aid the popular uprising. There's a lot of question about it. Is that potential there?
Yes. So the military that you're referring to, called Artesh, is actually, historically speaking, a great supporter of the monarchy. So they were actually the reason why they don't have many weapons, because the regime doesn't trust the military, because the military could betray. I would expect that they would. A lot of people have defected. They can't do this openly for very obvious reasons. The regime comes after you and comes after you hard. So it's not just you. It's going to be your children, and they literally go through your entire family tree. It's a horrible abomination of a regime. We have to free Iranians from them. We have, for the sake of us, for the sake of our Western democracies. Let's remember that they have threatened President Trump's life about 5 times now. They have attempted to kill him several times, or so they claim. They're also threatening the West. I mean, they're literally infiltrating us. They are destroying Western society from the inside. They have captured our universities, which means that, can you imagine, those kids will grow up and will be the next generation of leaders?
Right.
I don't feel like living under a mullah anytime soon. I don't know about you, but no.
Right. And certainly the people of Iran have had enough. Catherine, please stay with us. Ambassador Ayalon, I want to move to another pressing issue, but one that certainly has connections to what we've been discussing. Now, the return of Master Sergeant Ron Gvili's body back to Israel from Gaza this week provided badly needed closure for his family and Israel as a whole. Killed in action fighting Hamas terrorists in the October 7th attack, Gvili was the last Israeli hostage held in Gaza, ending a painful chapter in this nation's history. But his return paves the way for a new chapter in Gaza's history. the start of phase 2 of the U.S. brokered peace agreement, beginning with this week's reopening of the Rafah crossing on the Sinai border. For the Netanyahu government, this phase poses big questions and challenges. Will Hamas agree to disarm? What will be the role of the new international security force taking its place? And will the Palestinian Authority be given a governance role in Gaza over Israeli objections? Here's what Prime Minister had to say addressing some of these issues.
אני שומע גם עכשיו את האמירות שנאפשר את שיקום עזה לפני הפירוז. זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שנכניס חיילים טורקים וחיילים קטרים לעזה. גם זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שאני אאפשר הקמת מדינה פלסטינית בעזה. זה לא קרה וזה לא יקרה.
Danny, Prime Minister Netanyahu the other night setting some red lines, but there's a lot of pressure from the Trump administration to which he and Israel owes a lot. Some have said some of those red lines have already shifted a bit. There's talk about partial demilitarization for partial reconstruction. I want to get your reaction to how firm the Prime Minister is going to be able to be in the coming weeks on these issues.
Yes, I think a lot will depend, of course, on the trust that he has with the president. President Trump is the one that will make the decision. Although, under him, there are two camps, I would say, within the administration. One is, I would say, the economics one, which is led by Jared Kushner and Witkoff. They would like to move forward as fast as possible with the reconstruction. Also for obvious economic gains. On the other hand, you have the strategist led by Rubio, which is the Secretary of State, which they look at the long term and they look also at the strategic picture, and they believe that it has to be done in a very judicious way. No more the mistakes of the past, where we look the other way when terrorists are cheating or are getting more munitions and strengthening their arms. So here it must be very, very well understood that there is no reconstruction without the demilitarization of Gaza. And I would say more than that, we need to look at the de-radicalization of Gaza as well. And this is something which is for the sustainable future. That means we need in Gaza a new curriculum system for the schools, a changing of the imams' calls in the mosques, the media incitement, Hamas media incitement. All this has to change if we really want to see a prosperous Gaza on the one hand and a safe Israel on the other.
And Catherine, coming back to your comment now about the influence of Qatar in, for example, Gaza with Hamas, and let's also remember Turkey reports that they're pressing to have Hamas terrorists be incorporated into a new Gaza police force, and we know there are links between the Trump administration and Qatar, and President Trump has spoken warmly about Qatar and the Turkish leader, President Erdogan.
Well, I think he likes the money that Qatar can provide, which is fair enough. Now, we need to understand and remember, Hamas can never have a gun. Never, ever again. We know what they do when they have those guns. So no thank you. Also, if you want, and I completely agree with Danny, what we need to do is to go one step further to cut off the money, take off the guns, cut off the money, re-educate people within, and make sure that religion and their mosque are not vehicles for terror. And for that, I'd like to invite people in the Muslim world to actually stand up for their religion and their faith that have been demonized by those people they call radicals, saying, oh, it's not us. Okay, but if you don't do anything about it and against them, then it's very difficult for us standing here to know the difference. How can I tell? They need to speak up. So it's not just about Israel and America to do the work. They need to do the work for themselves and decide that, do you want to live under Hamas forever and have nothing and have a miserable life, or do you want to actually breathe free and use the thing between your ear called the brain and think for yourself and exercise critical thinking?
All right, and then I want to ask you about a role of another country, Egypt, because starting this week, it's going to play a major role, for example, in policing its part of the Rafah crossing. Certainly, Egypt is on a different country from Qatar and Turkey, but it's certainly a country that sometimes Israel has found itself difficult to work with.
Yes, it's a very complex relationship. Of course, the national interest of Egypt and Israel very much converge or intertwine when it comes to Hamas, or the Brotherhood, the Islamic Brotherhood, which Hamas is part of, and they are the Brotherhood is the most, I would say, existential threat to the al-Sisi regime and to Egypt as a whole. So in that respect, there is a great cooperation, mostly on intelligence and under the radar. But at the same time, Sisi has to heed to the pressure from the public in Egypt and the sentiments that are pro-Palestinians. So in that respect, I think that he would walk a very fine line. On the one hand, try to help the humanitarian situation as much as he can in Gaza, by opening the Rafah and insisting on the opening of the Rafah crossing. Right. But at the other hand, he will not allow the Brotherhood and Hamas to really rise up. And for that, he needs Israel cooperation and collaboration.
All right. Well, certainly going to be some interesting days ahead for Israel and for the entire region. I want to thank Ambassador Danny Ayalon and Catherine Paris-Shakdam for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. With all that is going on with Iran and Gaza, perhaps not enough attention is being paid to another key security front for Israel, its shared border in the north with Syria. Last week, the former National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, penned an opinion piece for Ynet titled, "Why Israel Should Put Syria First," arguing that the government should make reaching a security agreement with the Damascus regime a diplomatic priority, even as it contends with other pressing developments. Drawing on his own experiences conducting intimate dialogues with senior Syrian officials, Hanegbi said he found a pragmatic willingness to reach compromises on some of the areas of disagreement still between the countries, and even more importantly, a deep and genuine hostility towards Iran and Hezbollah that would make Syria an invaluable ally for Israel in combating the malevolent Tehran regime and its terror proxies. Now, this comes amid optimism toward a renewal of direct negotiations between Israeli and Syrian officials, expected to begin shortly under the mediation of the U.S. envoy Tom Barak, with some reports even suggesting the possibility of a deal that could reach beyond security arrangements to encompass full diplomatic recognition and even Syria's inclusion in the Abraham Accords. But to be sure, some formidable challenges remain. Israel's biggest concern is maintaining security along the Golan and Mount Hermon frontier, ensuring that southwest Syria does not become a launching pad for Islamist elements still there to launch attacks both across the border and on the local Syrian Jewish communities. For Israel to withdraw from its forward positions in Syria, it will need strict guarantees and possibly full demilitarization of the region. From President Ahmed al-Shara. Now, given his own Islamic terrorist background, many in Israel still do not trust al-Shara. But a good test of his intentions will become evident in the coming weeks of how he handles the situation of the Kurds in northern Syria, whether his government can successfully reintegrate the remaining Kurdish forces into the Syrian army with minimal violence while maintaining the civil and religious rights of Kurdish civilians within the body politic. And as for Israel's long-standing territorial dispute with Syria over the Golan, that is an issue that can likely be delayed indefinitely through symbolic gestures while Israel maintains full sovereignty over the region that was fully recognized by the prior Trump administration. Now, the talks between Israel and Syria are being held in parallel with ongoing negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, also being mediated by the U.S. envoy Tom Barak. But those discussions are likely to yield little fruit as long as a fully armed Hezbollah, controlled by a long-standing Iranian regime, still continues to intimidate a cowed Lebanese government. Elsewhere on the diplomatic front, the dream of a breakthrough in Israel's relations with Saudi Arabia seems more dependent than ever on developments in Gaza on the Palestinian issue, which at this point seem years or even decades away. But the creation and strengthening of Israel's ties with Syria could prove to be an impetus in improving those situations by weakening Iran and Hezbollah's hold on Lebanon and showing the Saudis that Arab nations need not be held hostage by progress on the Palestinian issue to advance their own political and security interests. Reaching a deal with Damascus, and even with the ex-jihadist al-Shara, may require a leap of faith on the part of policymakers in Jerusalem, backed by both concrete security arrangements and ironclad geopolitical commitments. But a chance to finally secure Israel's Golan border and bring Syria into its regional alliances is a once-in-a-several-generations opportunity that is still worth taking. Thank you for joining ILTV Security.
Well, Jewish National Fund USA's Faculty Fellowship Program in Israel recently wrapped up. The program bringing non-Jewish American college and university professors to Israel for an immersive, eye-opening experience. Today, we're speaking with two distinguished participants, Paul Yankee and Kathy Elias, to share how this trip helped shape their perspectives and strengthen their narratives. Paul and Kathy, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, how have your preconceived notions of Israel been challenged? Paul, let's start with you.
Thank you. I have been very excited about being in Israel and experiencing Israel. I came very curious. And the preconceived elements that I might have had was that there was very much a living under pressure, but what I also saw was a stronger resilience and a stronger resolve than I had expected. And with that, great insight, great ability, and also a very caring heart in many different ways. So I didn't come with necessarily super strong preconceptions one way or the other. I had a great respect already for Israel coming from my days working in technology and the intelligence that they bring into that space. And so I was really wanting to understand more how this all works, how these countries that are having such disparate views on things able to coincide together.
And Kathy, can you share from your perspective your experience as well?
Well, I want to point out that I'm coming this time on the faculty fellowship as an ambassador. So I've been here before, and so this is the second time around. And so I'm looking at very different things. The first time around, a lot of what Paul said, looking at all the innovation, looking at all the really wonderful things that have gone on in terms of research and all in Israel. But this time I've come and I've tried to focus more on the people. And coming from a university that had a lot of problems and a lot of negative actions on campus, I tried to talk to a lot of students also when I was here. And one of the things, I want to bring back that I think is extremely important to our students is just how much many of the students here, of course, are very similar in what they like about government, what they don't like about government, their criticisms, but also their desire to live the same kind of good life and their willingness to really want to engage with students in the United States and be heard.
Paul, what will you be taking back with you to campus from what you've learned or experienced here on the program?
I'll first off say we've had a very full 12 days of visiting a lot of different universities, a lot of different organizations, businesses, museums. And I will tell you, my mind is still very much processing. I'm looking forward to bringing all this together, letting it gel. But one thing that I have seen is I think there's a great need in my university setting and in my element of the areas of influence I have to consider more the consequences of things. And that's something that I've definitely seen be very paramount in Israel is consequences are real and deep for everything that comes up. And I think there can be this context of not considering always the consequences, how it plays out to all the related constituents to different elements that come up. So that's one piece that I want to bring out. I also want to bring more of a perspective of what's really happening, what's really going on. I think when you're able to experience different cultures, different areas, the best way, without any question, to do it is to actually be there. And JNF affords that possibility for people, particularly for academics in this situation.
All right, Kathy, Elias, and Paul Yankee, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today and sharing with us your insights and experiences.
Thank you very much for having us.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from the region. And now, war or no war? That is the big question. With the possibility of a U.S. attack, the U.S. and Iran may be heading towards talks instead of war. Israel's Channel 12 reports that the United States and Iran have quietly informed each other they are ready to enter negotiations aimed at diffusing the current crisis. A senior American official says President Trump's public calls for a deal are genuine and not a deception ahead of a military strike. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are now working to organize a meeting this week between envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian officials. The diplomatic push comes as Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. attack would spark a regional war. Take a listen to Trump's comments.
Sir, on Iran, the supreme leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Do you have any response to that, sir?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
And now the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has officially reopened today for the first time since the Gaza war. The crossing has been closed for around 2 years. The pedestrian-only passage is part of a limited reopening under the ceasefire agreement, which came after yesterday's system test at the crossing. Exit from Gaza will be monitored remotely by Israel using facial recognition technology, while entry into Gaza from Egypt will include Israeli security screening at an IDF checkpoint. Israel stresses the crossing will not be used for aid or goods. Those deliveries will continue to flow through other Israeli screened routes. And continuing with Gaza, the IDF says a terror operative was killed after crossing the ceasefire line in southern Gaza and posing an immediate threat to Israeli troops. According to the military, several operatives crossed the so-called yellow line and approached IDF soldiers in a suspicious and threatening manner. The IDF says troops identified the danger and opened the fire to remove the threat, killing one of the operatives. Palestinian media reported that a 63-year-old man was killed in a drone strike near Rafah on the Israeli-controlled side of the ceasefire line. Nikolay Mladenov, who is the High Representative on the Board of Peace, said he is deeply concerned by the events that have been going on since Friday. These events include both Hamas terrorists emerging from a tunnel in Rafah and Israeli strikes that he said tragically also killed civilians. Mladenov called on all sides to show restraint. Moving to Israel's northern front, the IDF says an airstrike in southern Lebanon killed a senior Hezbollah engineering commander as Israel continues to act against ceasefire violations along the northern border. The IDF says he was involved in rehabilitating Hezbollah's military infrastructure and advancing terror plans against IDF troops. And finally, for some exciting news, the Portland Trailblazer star Deni Avdija has become the first ever Israeli selected to the NBA All-Star Game. It's a milestone moment for Israeli sports. The 25-year-old forward, who grew up on a kibbutz in northern Israel, was named a Western Conference All-Star reserve after a breakout season that has put him among the NBA's elite. Superstars including LeBron James have praised his rise. Back home in Israel, fans are celebrating a dream come true.
How much you work, how much pride are you feeling with this honor?
I'm proud, and I just remember all the journey that I came a long way. I wasn't in the easiest situations throughout my career, and I started playing basketball without a dream, and pursue it, and just see wherever it takes me, and it's hard to believe that you just accomplish thing after thing after thing. It's just it's just emotional for me, for sure. Yeah.
And before we go, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Just scan the QR code on your screen to join. That's a wrap of this edition of ILTV on the Hour. As this day is the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, we at ILTV also want to wish you a happy holiday. I'm India Naftali. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Sivan Raviv, and coming up in today's newscast. U.S. President Donald Trump sets a deadline for Iran as the U.S. and Israel signal readiness for a strike. The Rafah crossing reopens as the Gaza ceasefire moves into its next phase and pressure mounts on Hamas to disarm. And Apple makes history with a $1.6 billion acquisition of Israeli AI startup QAI. As tensions with Iran reach a critical point, Israel's top military leadership has been coordinating closely with Washington. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir was in the United States over the weekend for high-level talks with American defense officials, just as President Donald Trump confirms he has given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal or face possible military action. With U.S. naval forces now visibly deployed in the region, a U.S. destroyer is now deployed in the Gulf of Eilat, giving a visible public display that Israel and the U.S. are fully coordinated ahead of potential military action. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Speaking at the White House, Trump said the deadline was communicated straight to Tehran, adding only they know for sure. Trump did not say when time runs out.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only
military
they
action?
know for sure.
Have you communicated that to them?
Yeah, I have.
Later, speaking on Air Force One, Trump reiterated that the United States has dispatched significant military assets to the region, but also said Iran is seriously talking with Washington on a deal that would see it give up nuclear weapons. American military pressure is visibly building in a sign of close cooperation between the IDF and the Central Command. A U.S.-guided missile destroyer has now reached the southern Israeli port of Eilat as additional naval and air assets move into the region, a signal that Washington is positioning for rapid action if talks collapse. Trump said U.S. forces would remain in place, declaring they have to float someplace. They might as well float near Iran.
We have a large armada, flotilla, you can call it whatever you want, heading toward Iran right now, even larger than what we had in Venezuela. It's still in front of Venezuela. The Venezuelan situation, the leadership is doing a very good job. We're very happy, and we're getting along very, very well. So we'll see how it all works out. You know, they have to float someplace. They might as well float near Iran, but it's a rough situation going on.
Iran, for its part, is trying to balance defiance with diplomacy. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran is ready for talks, but only, quote, on equal footing and with mutual respect. Top security official Ali Larijani says a framework for negotiations with the United States is now taking shape. Iran's army chief said he's ready to defend the Islamic Republic against U.S. attack. Meanwhile, Iranian media report 6 people killed in separate explosions in southern and southwestern Iran, including the strategic port city of Bandar Abbas and the city of Akhvas near the Iraqi border. Iran says the incidents were caused by gas leaks, denying any attack, and an Israeli official said Israel is not aware of any connection. All this comes amid Iran's ongoing crackdown on protesters and a standoff many fear is entering its most dangerous phase yet. And Trump says there is a deadline.
And satellite images reveal Iran is actively working to salvage nuclear materials from sites damaged in last year's Israeli and U.S. strikes. Imagery from Planet Labs shows new roofs built over destroyed structures at the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities, the first significant activity there since the 12-day war with Iran last June. Experts say the roofs are not part of reconstruction, but a deliberate effort to block satellite surveillance while Iran assesses whether critical assets, including stocks of highly enriched uranium, survived the attacks. Iran has barred International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors from the sites, leaving satellite imagery as the only way to monitor activity on the ground. Tehran has not commented on this. Analysts warn the move suggests a covert recovery operation, not transparency, as Iran also continues digging near Natanz and rebuilding sensitive military and missile-related facilities elsewhere. Now, with U.S. warships moving toward Iran and President Trump openly warning of military action, but also making a reference to a possible deal, questions are growing over whether diplomacy still has a chance. Joining us now to break this down is Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Middle East expert from Bar-Ilan University. Thank you for joining.
Pleasure.
So President Trump publicly commented about giving Iran a deadline to strike a deal, while also moving a large armada of U.S. warships toward the region. What kind of deal are we talking about here? Is it only about nuclear enrichment, or are there other elements on the table? What do you think?
Well, history shows that the Iranians are abiding to demands which come upon them from other countries only when they feel a credible threat. Only then they succumb to the demands of countries like the United States of America. And apparently, what Trump is building here is a credible threat. Means a threat if you the guys, means Iranians, if you don't do what I tell you to do, you will suffer tremendously. And he is preparing this suffering. So there is a chance that they will succumb, they will give up on the nuclear program, or at least they will agree to freeze it. They might even free political prisoners, means those kids who were caught and arrested during the riots like in the last month. And definitely they will try to buy time in order to bring Trump to the midterm elections in November, when he cannot start a war because he will lose the majority in the Congress or in the Senate as well. So this is what they will try, as always, to buy time and to gain whatever they need by buying time.
Now, would you say Israel and the United States are aligned on Iran? Meaning, is there a deal that would be acceptable to the U.S. but not to Israel?
Of course. If the United States comes to a deal with the Iranian regime, and the Iranian regime remains as the ruling elite of Iran, this is something which Israel might not tolerate, because the problem is not only their missile program and the nuclear program. The problem is the regime, because this regime will always try to get nuclear weapons. This regime will always try to renew its arsenal of missiles. And if it will not be in the Trump's time, it will be in his successor time. And they have patience. In the Quran, there is a verse which says that Allah is with those who have patience. And they have a lot of patience, those Shia. They waited to the returning of the Shia to the government more than 1,000 years, since the 7th century. So, yes, their terms of time are totally different from the Western culture. They can wait for 20 years, 100 years. It's okay, they can wait. They ain't going anywhere. And this is their mindset, which the world unfortunately doesn't understand. They have to be kicked out totally. They have to be chased out until the end of the mullahs from Iran. Maybe bring back Reza Shah from the United States or somebody else. Dismantle Iran to ethnic states like a Kurdish state and the Azerbaijani state. Maybe they will join Azerbaijan, which once was under the Soviet Union. Turkmenistan or Turkmen state, Baluchi state, and the Arab state in the Ahwaz. And these are the ethnicities which Iran is comprised of. And this is the only solution which will bring some peace to these regions of Iran.
Now, how do you assess Iran's internal stability right now, following all the protests and the extremely aggressive crackdown and the killings?
Well, as long as the regime is there, they will continue to butcher their people because they don't care about anyone in the people, especially those who are running in the streets demanding the removal of the regime. So if the world tolerates it, let the world bear consequences, because if they don't care about their own citizens, they don't care about anybody else. Because why should they care for others if they don't care for their own citizens? They might, in order to convince Britain to do all kinds of things, they might threaten Britain that they will send some missiles towards London. And what will London do? And they might threaten France and other countries as well. And missiles are not, and nuclear weapons are not only the problem of Israel.
Dr. Mordechai Kedal, thank you very much.
Your pleasure.
And now to Gaza. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt reopened today for pedestrian traffic only, following the return of the last Israeli hostage from Gaza. The move comes as the ceasefire enters its next phase, and as the United States pushes for Hamas to disarm. ILTV's India Naftali has the details. India.
Sivan, the reopening of Rafah is a major step under the ceasefire agreement, but Israel's making clear that this will be a limited and highly controlled opening, with security remaining the top priority. The Rafah crossing reopened today for people traveling between Gaza and Egypt, but not for goods or aid. The Defense Ministry's coordinator of government activities in the territories, known as Kogat, says all movement will require prior Israeli security clearance and will be coordinated with Egypt under the supervision of a European Union mission. Only Gazans who left during the war, mostly medical patients and dual citizens, will be allowed to return, and only after individual security vetting. Israel will remotely monitor departures using facial recognition, while those entering Gaza will pass through an IDF security checkpoint before continuing. Israel stresses that Rafah will not be used for aid or commercial goods, citing past use of the crossing by Hamas to smuggle weapons and operatives. The announcement comes as the United States signals that disarming Hamas is central to the next phase of the ceasefire.
And now we want to get Hamas no guns, right?
Right, they're going to give it up. They're going to give up the AK-47s.
A lot of people said they'll never disarm. Looks like they're going to disarm.
U.S. officials say the second phase of the plan is now underway, including international efforts to press Hamas to give up its weapons. Israel, however, has not confirmed any agreement by Hamas to disarm and continues to warn that security conditions on the ground remain fragile. The Rafah opening follows Israel's recovery of the remains of Ran Gvili, the last hostage held in Gaza, a condition Israel previously set for reopening the crossing. With Rafah set to reopen in a limited form, Israel is balancing ceasefire commitments with strict security controls. Whether the crossing remains open and expands will depend on what happens next with Hamas and the stability of the ceasefire. Sivan?
Thank you very much, India. Despite declared ceasefires in Gaza and in Lebanon, the multi-front warfare is continuing. In Lebanon, heavy IDF strikes on Hezbollah operatives, and in Gaza, one of the deadliest escalations in months. More on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
At least 32 Palestinians are reportedly killed in a wave of Israeli airstrikes across the Gaza Strip over the weekend in what is described as one of the deadliest escalations since the October ceasefire. The IDF says the strikes were launched in a direct response to violations of the ceasefire after 8 armed gunmen emerged from a Hamas tunnel in southern Gaza's Rafah. According to the military, 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. The military says it targeted 4 Hamas and Islamic Jihad commanders, along with a weapons depot, an arms manufacturing site, and rocket launch positions. Turning to the north, the IDF says it eliminated a Hezbollah terrorist in southern Lebanon who was attempting to re-establish terror infrastructure. This in a clear violation of the ceasefire understandings between Israel and Lebanon. According to the military, the strike took place in the Makraba area, where the operative was involved in efforts to rebuild Hezbollah operational capabilities near Israel's northern border. The IDF said the activity posed a direct threat and constituted a breach of the agreements meant to prevent Hezbollah from rearming and redeploying in southern Lebanon. The IDF stressed it will continue to act against any attempts to re-establish Hezbollah terror infrastructure and to remove any threat to Israel.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
The Trump administration has moved to fast-track more than $6.5 billion in U.S. weapons aid to Israel, bypassing the traditional congressional review process, a step that is already sparking sharp political backlash in Washington. The State Department confirmed the package includes Apache attack helicopters, joint light tactical vehicles, light helicopters, and armored vehicle power systems. It is the 3rd time the Trump administration has circumvented informal oversight by congressional foreign affairs committees to expedite arms shipments to Israel. The U.S. also approved the potential $9 billion sale of Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. In November, U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman signed multiple diplomatic agreements, including one regarding the future sale of F-35 stealth fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. And diplomatic tensions between Israel and South Africa escalated sharply last week after Pretoria expelled Israel's top diplomat, prompting an immediate retaliatory move by Jerusalem. More from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
South Africa on Friday declared Israel's chargé d'affaires persona non grata and ordered him to leave the country within 72 hours, according to an official government statement. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation said it had informed Israel that Ariel Seidman, the Jewish state's top diplomat in South Africa, was being expelled for what it described as repeated violations of diplomatic norms. According to the statement, those violations included the alleged use of official Israeli platforms to criticize South African leadership, including the country's president, as well as a failure to notify authorities about visits by senior officials. Pretoria said the actions constituted a breach of the Vienna Convention and undermined bilateral trust. Israel responded swiftly. The Foreign Ministry announced that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar had declared South Africa's senior diplomatic representative in Israel, Sean Edward Bain Uveld, persona non grata, ordering him to leave within 72 hours. Jerusalem said additional steps may follow. The diplomatic standoff comes amid already strained relations between Israel and South Africa, which has led to legal action against Israel at both the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice over the war against Hamas. Washington has objected to South Africa's genocide case at the ICJ, viewing it as a political attack on a close U.S. ally. President Donald Trump previously froze most U.S. aid to Pretoria, citing its foreign policy positions, including ties with Iran and Russia. Meanwhile, the South African Zionist Federation condemned Pretoria's move, accusing the ANC government of targeting Israeli humanitarian cooperation projects, including clean water initiatives in underserved communities. The group warned that blocking such efforts would ultimately harm vulnerable South Africans and deepen internal failures.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
Apple has made a major bet on Israeli innovation, acquiring the secretive Israeli AI startup QAI in a deal reportedly worth $1.6 billion, the largest acquisition in Apple's history. The move, confirmed by reports from the Financial Times and Reuters, puts Israel at the center of Apple's next big push in artificial intelligence. QAI, which operated largely under the radar, has developed breakthrough technology that can interpret silent speech, reading facial expressions and micro movements to translate human intent into digital action. Apple says the technology could transform how users interact with devices, from smartphones to headphones and future smart glasses, without touch, typing, or spoken commands. Apple hardware chief Johnny Srouji called QAI a remarkable company, praising its pioneering use of imaging and machine learning. The company is led by Aviad Meisels, a familiar name in Israel's tech scene. This is the second company he has sold to Apple after PrimeSense, the Israeli startup behind Microsoft's Kinect technology for Apple. The deal signals a significant and a strategic shift as it seeks to catch up in the global AI race. For Israel, it is a clear vote of confidence and a powerful reminder of the country's role as a global AI innovation hub. A big deal for Apple and a very big moment for Israeli high-tech. And for the last time, thousands gathered at Tel Aviv's Hostage Square for the weekly Shabbat ceremony, a place that has become the heartbeat of a nation waiting for its people to come home for 2.5 years. And as this chapter comes to a close, the question remains, what comes next?
For the final time, thousands gathered for the weekly Kabbalat Shabbat ceremony, singing Hatikva, Israel's national anthem, at the place that came to symbolize a nation holding its breath. Among those in the crowd were former hostages and families who lived through captivity and loss. With the return of the last slain hostage, many described a collective moment of release and relief, a country finally able to exhale after more than 2 years of uncertainty and pain. But alongside relief came a warning. Speakers stressed that the real test now begins, whether the unity forged through shared grief and struggle can endure once the hostages are home and the square grows quiet. Families urged Israelis not to let Hostages Square fade into memory, calling it a symbol of mutual responsibility and national solidarity. They asked the public to preserve what was built there, the bond between strangers who became one community through tragedy. The gathering closed as it began, with song of hope, grief, and resolve.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now.
Israel is now facing high air pollution this weekend as a dust storm from North Africa entered the region. The Environmental Protection Ministry and the Health Ministry warn that strong southwesterly winds are carrying heavy dust across the entire country, with conditions expected to last through tomorrow. Health officials are urging sensitive groups, including children, the elderly, pregnant women, and those with heart or lung disease, to stay indoors and avoid strenuous outdoor activity. Israel is also in the midst of record-breaking heat for February, with a 39-year temperature record expected today. The Meteorological Service says dry southern air will push temperatures up to levels not seen since 1987. The unseasonal heat is expected to break by tomorrow evening, with cooler air and rain arriving from the north and center. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, I moved to Israel. I made Aliyah almost a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I was sitting on the beach with some friends in the summer of 2023, and I said, this is the place that I have to be. It's the place I'm the most authentic people, and I
gotta come home.
Nachon,
I'm coming
yes,
home.
Exactly. And then I entered the Miss
Welcome.
Universe Israel pageant.
Now, how does, okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Hi, I moved to Israel. I'd like to join the Miss Universe pageant.
Yeah.
Like that's not what I did when I came here. Welcome to the Jewish Matchmaker podcast on ILTV. I'm Eliza Ben Shalom, your host. And today I am speaking with Danielle Yablonka, Miss Herzliya and first runner-up for the Miss Universe Israel 2025. She was focusing on the theme of transforming challenges into blessings. She is a
turning
25-year-old Jewish activist, entrepreneur, and fashion model based in Herzliya. She does.
Ooh, I'm based in Tel Aviv now.
Oh my gosh, this is all outdated. She's based in Tel Aviv now, and she uses her platform to advocate for Jewish pride, Jewish identity. She also actively shares content related to Israeli culture, events, national resilience, and she is the founder of DY Judaica, which you can see she's wearing.
Yeah.
Danielle,
Always.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. And I want to
see
talk
you.
about who our matchmaker was and how I know you.
Yeah.
Nefesh B'Nefesh.
Nachon, yes.
They did an influencer program.
They did.
Right. You're the one in the room that's like this.
Yeah, I'm the 6-foot giant.
Yeah, yeah. And I walk around going, hi, hi.
You and all the guys in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. And I met you and I was like, who is she? Where is she from? What is her story?
Opa.
So take us back. What's your story? How'd you get to Israel? Who are you? What is
am
this?
I?
I mean, like a pageant for real? Like
Yeah.
you were in a real, are you like a pageant girl? Did you grow up doing this since you were like 5 years old?
No, never. It's really a crazy story, and I'll give you the super speed, the snip-snap, the TikTok version.
She's working on her Hebrew, everybody.
Yeah,
TikTok.
I'm working. But I grew up, born and raised in Miami. I've always loved being Jewish my entire life, and I've somehow made it my entire personality and career. I started as an artist, and I painted about Holocaust remembrance, education. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and in high school, it transformed in activism, college activism, social media, and here we are since October 7th. My modeling career has basically died because of my open Zionism online. And
we need you to be an Israeli mother.
Can. Any Israeli brand listening, I'm ready to work for you.
רק באנגלית, only in English though.
Yes.
She's working on her Hebrew.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's just the accent I'm good at. And so that's a little bit about me. And then I moved to Israel. I made Aliyah almost a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I was sitting on the beach with some friends in the summer of 2023, and I said, this is the place that I have to be. It's the place I'm the most authentic people, and I
gotta come home.
Nachon,
I'm coming
yes,
home.
Exactly. And on October 7th, after October 7th, I had a flight booked, and it got canceled, and I said, now more than ever, I need to come home.
Wow.
So I made Aliyah in September of last year, August, September.
September 2024.
2024, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
So you're a newbie.
Yeah, and then I entered the Miss
Welcome.
Universe Israel pageant.
Now, okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Hi, I moved to Israel. I'd like to join the Miss Universe pageant.
Yeah.
Like that's not what I did when I came here. How did you do that?
It's really crazy. Miss Universe Israel stopped happening in Israel. I don't know why. They just stopped doing it as a state-funded pageantry altogether. And then a Miami production company picked up the title, and I saw someone else do it, and I said, Denny Bergman. I saw Denny Bergman run for Miss Israel, who was on Your Jewish Matchmaking.
She was
Miss Tel Aviv in 2024. I know. And I was
missed
like,
that. I totally
if
missed
that
that.
Danny's going to do it, this Danny's going to do it too. So I applied right away. And I was Miss Herzliya 2025. I ran, and I came in first runner-up for Miss Universe Israel.
Oh my
God willing, next year.
So you're going to do it again. So you're continuing. You're like, that was fun.
I'm ready to be Miss Tel Aviv.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
This is so. Tell us a little bit. Come on. You got to give us insight into pageant life. Is it really what we all think it is? Like everybody walks around and it's like, oh, please do my makeup, my hair, put yourself together.
These girls are intelligent, strong women. I watched Miss Congeniality right before the pageant. I was like, I gotta get in the mindset, and it's just like that. It is just like that movie. These girls are intelligent. They're beautiful, and I think if you're running to represent your country, you love your country, and I love being surrounded by like-minded, passionate individuals, and that's what pageantry is all about. I definitely went into it with that mindset, everyone's just going to be like, but they weren't. They were really
I'm
awesome.
putting it out there. I want to host. I want to be one of the hosts.
That would be
I want to
so
go around.
awesome.
I want to interview everybody. I want to talk to them.
Yes.
Anybody who's single, I want to make sure everybody in the world knows who the single ones are so that we can set them up.
Yes.
Okay, can we lean into that with you?
We'll definitely lean into it.
No, right now.
Oh, let's do it. Newly single, ready to...
You're newly single.
Yeah,
single and ready to mingle.
I am.
You are.
5-6 months now.
5-6 months. And are you feeling grounded in Israel and like you could integrate dating and love and relationships?
I think I have. I think I have been. It's funny. I tell people I was in a relationship for a year, and it helped me grow. It helped me get through October 7th, helped him grow through October 7th. And once we both reached a point of healing, we started growing in different directions. And
sometimes, by the way, there's a trauma bond that happens with relationships. So whether it's something like October 7th or something else personal in somebody's life where they're going through a trauma or something really intense, there is this like bond that happens. And then the question is, but are there real values behind it? Is there the potential for a long-term relationship, or do we just have this trauma bond that brought us together, but it's not going to be the thing that keeps us together?
I always say Hashem brought us together in the perfect moment because I needed him the most, and I think he needed me too. And it was a beautiful year together. And then we broke up, and I went to run for Miss Universe Israel, which I didn't win. And I came back to Israel in July, and I was just like, who am I? I'm alone. I'm single in this new country.
So who are you?
Who am I? I'm still figuring that out. I think I'm still figuring that out. I'm a almost 25-year-old passionate artist, activist. Am I allowed to say badass?
You just did. Oops.
Oopsie beep. But I think I have a lot to offer, and I'm in a transition right now, and I'm loving it. I'm really getting to know myself and dating.
And Judaism-wise, where do you fit in? There's no box, but just tell us your flavor of Judaism.
I love this. No, that's a fantastic question. No box, but I think I don't know who can see me or who's just listening, but I'm wearing like a mini skirt and boots, But I keep Shabbat now. I make challah every Friday. I've started a challah movement, I'm going to call it.
Ooh.
And I share my recipe, and people have been
I have
sending
a
me
really
pictures.
good recipe I can
Do
share it with
you?
you. Somebody told me once that my challah tasted like Eretz Yisrael. When
Whoa.
when I was in Philly, and I was like,
Whoa.
you can come back to my Shabbos table and have challah anytime if you say that it tastes like Eretz Yisrael.
Send me the recipe.
Okay.
But I got people sending me DMs, trying it with their kids, the challah recipe, and that has been giving me so much happiness. And I'm really diving in. I go to shul every Friday and Saturday. I don't go on my phone. I wouldn't say I'm Shomer Shabbos if my future husband is listening, because I still watch TV and I hang.
You go in the box of like Flexodox,
Yeah,
traditional. I love my
yeah.
Judaism. I'm
So
living
much.
pieces of my Judaism, and I'm not like
Yeah, I'm kosher style. I do
Yeah.
it not because I'm worried about it being kosher. I do it because it connects me to my Judaism. It's my tradition. It makes me feel closer to the rules.
And there's so many options here.
There really are. There
It's
really
the best.
are.
You live in Israel, and the whole kosher world opens up. You're like, in America, there's nothing to eat, and where can I go? And all the countries,
Didn't have that problem,
across
no.
the globe, you like go to like the one kosher restaurant, which is usually like a falafel shop, right?
Yeah,
and that's
no.
it. Here, it's
Everything.
anything. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Personality-wise, obviously, you've got personality, you've got pop, you've got sparkle. What kind of a guy do you need? Does he have to match your energy and you need to be the power couple? Is it cool if he's like the strong, like behind the scenes kind of guy? Like, what's a vibe for you?
What's a vibe?
Yeah, you're like, we gotta get
What's my
into
vibe?
this. We gotta
Okay,
get into,
I'm gonna
because
tell you.
I want to make your match.
Yes, yalla, I'm gonna tell you.
Actually, I want you, the audience. I want you to make her match. Just call me. I'll set it up.
Oh, okay, you guys. So it's funny. My first serious boyfriend was like this Persian, Israeli, tough. You know, if I had a flat tire, he was there. He was for 2 years we dated. We were together. Loved him. And then I went to like this not Jewish frat boy for a little bit, and then I went to this Ukrainian soldier boy, an Israeli who's sweet and kind and all the good things. So I always say I don't have a type. I love Mizrahi. I like Ashkenazi.
Anything in between.
I'm 6 feet tall. I'm 181 centimeters. So I don't mind someone being my height. I don't need someone who's 6'7". I really don't.
Okay.
But I would like someone who's confident in their height. I want someone who cares about me and has passions and is driven and is inspired by what I do and wants me to continue growing and doing my own thing, and I want them to have their own thing. And that's all I want.
So they need to have something they're excited about, something they're passionate about,
Absolutely.
something that lights them up on the inside.
100%.
Okay, and he has to be confident, because even if he's 6 feet, if you're wearing heels, you're
Oh, yeah.
still going to be taller, and you're cool with that?
I am. I'm totally cool with that.
I mean, can I tell you?
Please.
We had a big hot debate online. It kind of went viral, and I got a little bit, I don't want to say in trouble, but like I got a lot of kickback, pushback, where people were not so happy. So this is what I said. If a woman is like 4'11" and a guy is like 6'3", I'm not going to make that match. Now, what didn't I say? I did not say that match shouldn't be made. I basically said, like, save the tall guys for the
Danielle.
tall girls. Yeah, save the tall guys for Danielle, because she doesn't have many options. And to set her up with a guy who's like 5'2" is not, and I don't do, you're good that you do the centimeters. I didn't convert over yet. But anyway, like, to set her up with a guy who's a foot, we're still in the not metric system. Anyway.
6 foot is 180 centimeters.
Yeah, so 5 foot, like, you just, to set you up with somebody that's so much shorter. Shorter, I don't mind a couple inches here, there, fine,
No,
whatever.
me either.
And whoever's comfortable. I saw one woman, this also went viral online. She said that she was about 5 inches taller than her husband. It was massive. You saw them next to each other. There was a full head difference between them, and he was shorter. And she's like, but that's my husband. And he's like, I don't mind. And she's like, I don't mind. And everybody's like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But we have, like...
To be honest with you,
we're short people.
I'm terrified of super tall people, because I'm so tall. And if someone else is so much taller than me, I've gone my whole life being so tall, to be next to someone who's 6'7", let's say, I'm feeling very small. I was always scared.
So you like being tall.
I love being tall.
Because you're used to it. That's normal for
you.
you.
And my mother always said to me, Danielle, her best friend is a tall woman, and she married a tall guy, and they have 2 sons, and both sons are like 6'9" and 6'8". Like, they're huge. Not just like tall, they're huge football players. My mom said, imagine if she had a girl. And I said, you're right. So I always go by that. I'm like, I can't marry someone that tall. I can't. It wouldn't be fair to a daughter if I had a daughter. I love my height, but
you're doing a favor for the gene pool, and you're trying to
really
even it out.
am.
So some people said that. They're like, listen, if a woman's tall, so marry a guy that's a little shorter, and you'll like even out the gene pool a little bit. Listen, I just want a match to be made. I think it's hard enough to make a match that it isn't really about height. But I do visually like things to have some proportion to them.
Yeah.
In the same way I like a face match. Like you see those couples together and they like look alike. You know when people also do they do photos with their dogs and they look alike.
I think everyone looks like their dog. So
I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
It's really true. Our dogs look like my husband.
I'm telling you. Yes.
So cute. So
Yes.
cute. Anyway, it just I like to see couples, but I like to see good couples, and good couples are always based on values and what type of a life and lifestyle you want to lead. Like, you wouldn't be compatible with somebody that's like, listen, I'm going to go back to Miami. That's where I want to be. You're like, no. Not only did my body move here, but my heart moved here. I am in Israel. I want to live here. If you want to live anywhere else in the world, I don't care how tall you are. I don't care what your other values are. We're not a good match. And if somebody said, like, love God, but I'm not doing anything about my Judaism, also wouldn't be a good match for you. We need somebody who's like, I love God. I want my
husband who can make
Judaism and
Kiddush.
can do something within my Judaism.
Yep.
So I think all those things are important. What else? They need to have their passion. You need to have your passion age-wise. Now listen. Wait, I'm going to dig in here for a minute and just tell you. In the way that I like, the height thing kind of like irks me a little. The age thing irks me less, and other people freak out. Okay? So in both directions. Sometimes I've set up a couple, the woman was 7 years older than the man. Okay? Right. Yeah. You were like, okay, people freak out like, what? How could that be? I'm like, well, what? We're breaking social norms. Same way you don't care about the height thing, so the age thing is a thing. Also, if the man is older. So my husband's 10 and a half years older than I am, if we're like getting nitty gritty about it. And it means that there's an age gap. There's sometimes some references,
Yes, but now you're like, mentally on the same.
He's like, I don't know if that's your generation, sweetheart. I'm like, I don't know either. but I think that when neshamas and souls actually connect, wow, the things that can happen. And age, I have more flex. If it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, okay, even up to 15 years, which is not my favorite unless both sides are like really okay. Yeah, I know you're rolling. See, that's what happens. People start to roll their eyes. And I had one woman say, my husband's 25 years older than me. And I was like, right.
That's a lot.
Okay. So I said the same thing. I was like, okay. So at that point, if somebody's got to draw a line, I'm like, wow. She goes, yeah, but that's my beshert. I get to choose that. And I was like,
period. So that I respect.
Mic drop. You're right.
Period.
Right. If that's who you want and they want you and everything's great, fine. But I do like it to be within a range. And
I agree.
If it can be closer, great also.
I would always say the thing is, I have a 23-year-old brother and I have a 45-year-old brother. So my mom, I know she got remarried, had two. She says she had her own grandchildren. So like I do have the older brothers. I do think my little brother and I are more mature because all of our cousins are like in their late 30s and 40s. Yeah. So I always said I would never date someone who's younger than my brother. That's so gross. And then my ex-boyfriend was 21 and I was 24. So I mean, that's not a huge age gap.
No, but it is at that age because, I mean, it depends. Look, if they're Israeli, they mature up faster. They go to the army. He
went to the army. He went to war.
Life and death. You're dealing with things that American and other kids around the world aren't dealing with maybe ever in their lifetime. Yeah. And that happens to you at such a young age. So there is a certain mental maturity that like you're 21, but really you've lived life like a 28, 30-year-old.
Absolutely. So I said he lost his leg in Gaza, so I said you lose a leg, you gain 5 years in wisdom.
You only gave him 5 years for a leg? I give him 10.
No, 5.
He's still a man.
He's still a man.
At 21. Okay.
Wonderful human. But yeah, moving forward, I think my age gap is definitely 27 to 35. I know that's really specific because I'm questioning because when I see 35-year-olds on the dating apps, they don't look 35. They look a little older. And
27 to 35 if he looks young, parentheses.
Yeah. I don't mind a guy looking older. I just think I'm still pretty young and I don't need to be with someone so seasoned. I think I have some spirit and spunk, so I'd love to be with someone that can match my energy level.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounds like it's more about the energy and maybe a youthful appearance than the chronological age.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we got the age. We got a little bit of the Judaism flavor. Got to be somebody who's living and loving the Holy Land. Is there any specific spot in Israel
Tel Aviv.
that really? And like, wait, sorry, raising kids here, or this is like live your young life here and then get married, have a family, and shift?
I haven't thought about that far, but when I do think about realistically having a family, I lived in Rishon LeZion here for 8 months, and I lived in Herzliya for 3-4 months, and now in Tel Aviv, and I'm nannying here in Tel Aviv, and I see kids growing up. It's beautiful. It's happy. I also have family that grew up in kibbutzim and moshav, and they have such a beautiful childhood. So I'm open to that.
You're flexible.
Yeah, Jerusalem, not my place, not my vibe. I love it for a day, but I love the Tel Aviv. I love Herzliya, Rishon, just the people, the
I also just want to call out, you said that you've been nannying in Tel Aviv,
Yeah.
right? So people are like, oh my gosh, she's Miss Herzliya, Miss Universe to me, right? And you've been nannying. I was doing that, by the way, before I got married.
Amazing.
And I just met somebody who showed me a photo, and she goes, oh my gosh, look, this is my cousin. Do you know who that is? And I was like, yes!
You babysat that?
I
so
babysat
cute.
her, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like 25 years ago.
That's
it was
crazy.
Like more, almost 30 years ago.
That's when I see the kids I nannied for in Palm Beach. I was like, I'm now on Instagram. Oh my God, I'm so old.
They
that's
grew
crazy.
up. They all grew up.
Crazy.
But you're nannying for
I'm
some
nannying.
kids.
I do nails. I am a graphic designer for funsies. Just anything I can do, for funsies. I gotta make money. Always, and I obviously have my jewelry brand.
So let's dig into that. Tell me about your jewelry brand. I see you're wearing a gorgeous necklace.
Yes, it's a Spanish Inquisition necklace because Jews had to hide their Judaism.
Wait, I have Spanish
heritage
on my mom's side.
So you need one. It's a
do.
Spanish Inquisition necklace. They created these butterfly necklaces that were magnets, and in public they'd open them, and then they would kind of disguise their Judaism. And in private,
is this magnetic?
It is a magnet, and in private it closes, so they
oh
could
my
kind
gosh,
of
it just turned into a star.
Yeah.
Wait, pull it apart again.
It's like also a really great fidget toy. And I just came out with a new one for men and women.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes. So I, in high school, always wore my Judaica from Israel, and everyone would say, like, Danielle, where's your star from? And I would say Israel. And I realized not everyone could just fly to Israel and go to Jerusalem, the Shuk, and get some jewelry. And everyone told me, you have to start a line. You have to start a line. So after college, I went in my savings and I launched my own Jewish jewelry brand. And a week later, October 7th happened. Wow. And I ended up donating pretty much 90% of my profit to Israel. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I closed it down, focused fully on Hasbara, which is Israel advocacy. And now I relaunched my brand 9 months ago. And I'm loving it. I love seeing people wear it. I love Jewish
pride. So you have necklaces like this that are
so many
necklaces. Convert and they transition.
Yeah.
You have bracelets, rings,
hand chains, rings. Mostly
and it's all like
earrings.
Jewish pride.
It's all Jewish pride Judaica. And Bizrat Hashem, God willing, the reason I didn't name it DY Jewelry is because I wanted to become Judaica. I want to start creating more Shabbos sets and Chanukah sets, Pesach, whatever. I want to expand.
So it's beyond jewelry. It's really something that's deep rooted within
I have a vision.
Judaica, your Judaism, and living a Jewish life, not just proudly living on you, but like having those things.
I want everyone to be able to access it. Yes.
I love this. And you ship everywhere, I
Everywhere,
assume?
worldwide, guys. Support this one-woman business.
She's not just Miss Herzliya. She's not just single and
She's
available.
She's a nail lady. She's
she
a babysitter.
And
She's
nannying and jewelry, and you're so versatile. And you're an influencer, because that's how we met. We started out like you in the influencer world. So Hasbara, advocacy, Israel, what else do you lean into, and how do you empower, motivate? For me, my Jewish matchmaker, I kind of accidentally became an influencer.
Awesome.
And just support the Jewish people. But I do everything through a love, relationships lens and not through, fighting, right?
Yeah.
It comes from just a place of bringing people together.
Yeah.
And that's my advocacy, like Jews hanging out with other Jews, marrying other Jews, having singles parties and events and setting people up and those things. But what's the angle that you come from?
So for me, I think my unique angle is that I'm young and I wouldn't say just graduated college anymore, but I had just graduated college in 2023. So coming into the Jewish advocacy space, this is all pre-October 7th, it was pretty niche to be able to have a student perspective. And since I was so involved in Israel advocacy throughout college and student government and whatnot, I was able to have the connections all over the country. And I worked with Hillel International and their Israel Leadership Network. And I mentor college students on being advocates online and social media.
Through this network, you are a mentor.
Yes.
You give them the understanding and the ability to speak up for themselves.
And I'm able to connect with them on a Gen Z level. I'm able to talk
Something
about
that
editing.
I can too.
I mean, no, and yes, no. But it's cool. I feel like I always call myself in the group chat, love your Zionist big sister, because I don't have a sister. I have all brothers. So I want to be, I always BBYO, Jewish Youth Group growing up, I always had girls who,
I was in BBYO. I was president of Hillel, social chair of Hillel. I got it. I got all my Jewish badges.
Exactly. BBYO is like my start, my core. So I always had an older sister figure who was always looking out for me and picked me up every week because my parents were working and taking me to meetings every week. It sounds like I'm going to AA, but it's Jewish AA.
It's just a social event where we hang out, eat some food.
And make future Jewish babies. No, God, no. Oh, my God.
Not at the young movement.
No. But I want to be that for college students. I want to be able to say, like, Danielle really helped me edit this video. Danielle amplified this. Since the war started, we were able to get people fired for their nasty, disgusting anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I'm helping students go viral, helping connect them to the news. That's my angle that I always say, if I don't know someone, I know someone who knows someone. And that's what one of my girl mentors taught me from Stand With Us in high school.
That's such a matchmaker thing to say.
Yeah,
I
always,
love it.
Always. And I always want people, I want to connect people.
Yeah.
I want to connect people. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
So I think that's my angle.
That's gorgeous. I love it.
Thank you.
I love the activism. I love the energy.
Thank you.
I love that you're a jack of all trades and like a mini master of many.
Thank you.
Right? Like I feel like
I'm called the contractor of my apartment.
Yeah.
I'm the man of my apartment.
Yeah, you just pull a whole bunch of different things together that make sense to you, that feel right, and that you also have different interests, right? Like,
I do.
Happy to work with kids, happy to work with jewelry line, happy to work with advocacy, happy to be an influencer online.
But don't take me camping.
Oh, there we have it.
There we have it. There's the ball drop.
Boom. Mic drop. You can take me to a runway. I'll be Miss Herzliya.
Love a runway.
No camping. Glamping. How about glamping?
Oh, everyone always says glamping. I mean, I'll pretend I like it as long as it's like really glamorous.
No. Okay.
No.
So just so that we're very clear for anybody that's keeping an eye out for you, if he is one of those earthy, crunchy, it's not going to work.
If he plays a guitar, the answer is no.
Oh, that is such a good insight because that you should open your profile with that. I'm not kidding. So many people feel the opposite. Like, oh, wow, if he plays a guitar, that's my kind of man.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, immediate no.
Okay, that's how you're starting it.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Danielle.
You're funny because my entire Hinge profile is like, I'm 180 centimeters. Yes, I'm 180 centimeters. No, I don't want a short king. Thank you. And everyone's swiping on me 5'7", 5'6", 5'4". I swear Israelis don't read. They just swipe.
Yeah. So you need to put only need apply if you're above 180
centimeters. Yes.
Or just slightly.
Yeah, like
okay,
179.
they lie anyway. They're going to be under it. But so fine. If you're above 180 centimeters and you do not, with N-O-T in capital letters, play the guitar.
You could be for me.
Yes.
Listen, I gave shorter guys a try, which I'd never done when I'd first become single here. I, by the way, was thinking about writing a book called 50 First Dates in Tel Aviv because I have been going on dates.
I'm going to give you an endorsement for it when you're writing the book.
Okay, we're going to talk about it after this.
You got it.
But I went out on a date with a short guy. one sent me a 3-paragraph message the next day. He was Shomer Negia and everything. We met at shul. He memorized my number. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Went on our date. I thought it was nice. The next day I woke up to a 4-paragraph message on like the next steps on our dating, and like I'll decide next date if we're still going to be Shomer Negia, and like this is how we'll proceed.
Okay, so he's a spreadsheet human.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. I have these kinds of guys and women also. They're spreadsheet humans. So also, if you're a spreadsheet human, only spreadsheet humans.
I need a spreadsheet human.
No,
Numbers aren't my friend. But don't send me a 4-paragraph message planning our next 4 dates. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
So that was a no. Lovely, lovely guy. And then the other one stood me up. So I'm not going to date someone shorter than me. I decided. So
Funny that he stood you up.
Yeah. I was just too threatening, you know.
I could talk to you all day.
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely adore you. How can people find you online if they want to reach out, either A, for dating to you or me, and also jewelry-wise if they want to connect?
Yeah, my jewelry page is DY Judaica, and you can just find it at www.dyjudaica.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Danielle Yablonka. That's DANIELLE Yablonka, YABLONKA. Okay, baby? Okay.
You got it. Fantastic. I absolutely
love you
adored
too.
this conversation.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the
50
book.
First Dates.
You got it. 50 First
Guys,
Dates.
I have some crazy stories.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining the Jewish Matchmaker podcast on ILTV. I'm Aliza Ben Shalom, and until next time, matches make families, families make communities, and communities change the world.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from the region. And now, war or no war? That is the big question. With the possibility of a U.S. attack, the U.S. and Iran may be heading towards talks instead of war. Israel's Channel 12 reports that the United States and Iran have quietly informed each other they are ready to enter negotiations aimed at diffusing the current crisis. A senior American official says President Trump's public calls for a deal are genuine and not a deception ahead of a military strike. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are now working to organize a meeting this week between envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian officials. The diplomatic push comes as Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. attack would spark a regional war. Take a listen to Trump's comments.
Sir, on Iran, the supreme leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Giving you a response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
And now the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has officially reopened today for the first time since the Gaza war. The crossing has been closed for around 2 years. The pedestrian-only passage is part of a limited reopening under the ceasefire agreement, which came after yesterday's system test at the crossing. Exit from Gaza will be monitored remotely by Israel using facial recognition technology, while entry into Gaza from Egypt will include Israeli security screening at an IDF checkpoint. Israel stresses the crossing will not be used for aid or goods. Those deliveries will continue to flow through other Israeli-screened routes. And continuing with Gaza, the IDF says a terror operative was killed after crossing the ceasefire line in southern Gaza and posing an immediate threat to Israeli troops. According to the military, several operatives crossed the so-called yellow line and approached IDF soldiers in a suspicious and threatening manner. The IDF says troops identified the danger and opened the fire to remove the threat, killing one of the operatives. Palestinian media reported that a 63-year-old man was killed in a drone strike near Rafah on the Israeli-controlled side of the ceasefire line. Nikolay Mladenov, who is the High Representative on the Board of Peace, said he is deeply concerned by the events that have been going on since Friday. These events include both Hamas terrorists emerging from a tunnel in Rafah and Israeli strikes that he said tragically also killed civilians. Mladenov called on all sides to show restraint. Moving to Israel's northern front, the IDF says an airstrike in southern Lebanon killed a senior Hezbollah engineering commander as Israel continues to act against ceasefire violations along the northern border. The IDF says he was involved in rehabilitating Hezbollah's military infrastructure and advancing terror plans against IDF troops. And finally, for some exciting news, the Portland Trailblazer star Deni Avdija has become the first ever Israeli selected to the NBA All-Star Game. It's a milestone moment for Israeli sports. The 25-year-old forward, who grew up on a kibbutz in northern Israel, was named a Western Conference All-Star reserve after a breakout season that has put him among the NBA's elite. Superstars including LeBron James have praised his rise. Back home in Israel, fans are celebrating a dream come true.
How much you work, how much pride are you feeling with this honor?
I'm proud, and I just remember all the journey that I came a long way. I wasn't in the easiest situations throughout my career, and I started playing basketball without a dream, and just pursue it, and just see wherever it takes me, and it's hard to believe that you just accomplish thing after thing after thing. It's just it's just emotional for me, for sure. Yeah.
And before we go, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Just scan the QR code on your screen to join. That's a wrap of this edition of ILTV on the Hour. As this day is the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, we at ILTV also want to wish you a happy holiday. I'm India Naftali. Thanks for watching.
If the world feels more chaotic than usual, you are not wrong. With America threatening to maybe take over Greenland and Russia and Ukraine's conflict just getting worse, and maybe the Iranian Islamic Republic is going to be brought down, and so many more mad things happening every single day, there is a method to this madness. You see, Trump's announcement this week of the Board of Peace is so much more significant than we have been led to believe. People are really focusing in on the details of what this is and will it resolve Gaza, but most people have completely missed the point. This is a total shift in world order and an attempt to actually try and create peace and stop these conflicts in real time. Trump is taking a significant gamble, and I'm all for it. We have to understand this thing to clock what is happening with the world and where we are moving towards. And if you want to understand all of that and more, welcome to the Meira K Show on JNS TV. Let's start from the very beginning. So it's 1920 and the world is kind of freaking out. World War I has ended, but about 20 million people have been killed in what feels like completely pointless deaths, and a bunch of countries convene to discuss how they can make sure something like this never happens again. They have a revolutionary idea. Instead of going to war, like what the world has done throughout all history, countries should sit down and chat about their issues, hopefully resolving them. They create what they call the League of Nations, which the US decides not to join. And if you're wondering if this League of Nations was a success, I'll jolt your memory to World War II, which erupts just a few years later. After World War II, the League of Nations is quickly disbanded because it's a complete failure. After all, countries are not going to talk about power plays. But then, after World War II, everybody kind of realized in the West, like, now seriously, we need to figure out how to stop World War III.
And so they rebirth their old theory, and the UN is born. The idea of the UN is a global organization founded to prevent another world war by providing a forum for any nation to discuss and resolve conflicts. And if it sounds kinda useless and pathetic, you aren't wrong, but we'll get to that in a moment. It's comprised of 193 nations who slowly join, and without getting too detailed and technical, the UN actually controls a lot more than most people realize. Unlike the League of Nations, which was just about discussions, the UN also has a body that's supposed to execute and move things forward. So, the main UN has a budget of about $3.5 billion and headquarters in New York, but they have many other entities under them, like the World Health Organization, the Universal Postal Union. Did you know the UN controls your post? And even the ICAO, which sets the standards for international flights, which is why we all speak the same language and don't bang into each other. They manage a combination of humanitarian initiatives and boring structural stuff that most of us don't even think about. Of course, with a budget of over $70 billion in taxpayer money. Now, don't think for a second that I think that the UN is an important entity. It's my belief that the UN is a prime example of bureaucracy that stops things from getting done. And if you're wondering what the big difference between the UN and the League of Nations was, you aren't really crazy. They're actually very similar in the fact that they don't really work. The bulk of what they do, at least in the area of trying to ensure World War II doesn't happen again, is just performative. What do I mean by that? Well, first off, they don't have the ability to enforce any of their decisions. They don't even have an army of their own. What they do have, though, is the ability to set legitimacy. Take, let's say, the ICJ, the international courts. They can decide that someone is a war criminal, even if that's not true. Can they arrest him? No, but they can make it legitimate for any of the countries that are part of the UN to decide to arrest said person. But it's not just that they can't do much outside of creating diplomatic pressure due to their inability to enforce, they're also ineffective as a system. What do I mean by that? Well, first off, enormous bureaucratic organizations don't tend to be effective, but more than that, they have a very interesting veto problem within their Security Council. What is the Security Council? Well, the UN realized that despite the fact that it has a General Assembly of 193 different members of countries, they need a place where the top 15 members can discuss important war topics and make decisions about it. They call it the Security Council, but there's a little bit of a catch. You see, the Security Council is supposed to be able to enforce and push things forward in a more legitimate way than the General Assembly. But the 5 countries that defeated the Nazis in World War II are given the ability to veto any decision that is made, meaning to basically chuck it out of the discussion room. Now, these 5 countries that defeated the Nazis include Russia. And so, let's just say Russia launches a war on the Ukraine. The UN Security Council effectively can't do much to stop it. Of course, this is an oversimplification, and as an Israeli, the fact that the US, which is one of those 5 countries, can veto many terrible decisions that are pushed forward to stop us fighting Gaza, let's say, is something I'm grateful for. But it's not a very effective system. And to prove my point, just look around you. Does it seem like the UN has done much to succeed in keeping wars at bay? Not really. But once again, we're rushing ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to where we're standing historically. It's 1949, and some countries realized that just having a group of people to talk about stuff isn't going to do enough to stop a potential world war, and so they develop an army of sorts called NATO. Now, if you've always been confused about the difference between the UN and NATO, here it is. NATO is a military alliance, a group of countries that decided if you hit one of us, you're going to hit all of us. 32 countries have united to protect themselves from outside attacks. They are a military force using their own military abilities. The UN has no military. It's a forum for discussions, and it is trying to keep peace and handle global issues through debates. But here's where it starts to get complicated. It's 1949, and we've got the UN there to handle the intellectual sides, and NATO there to defend countries from a potential Germany's flare-up again. And then it starts to get a little complicated, as Russia is a part of the UN. And this is the same time that the Cold War starts between the USSR and the US. This effectively paralyzes the UN. Because of the ability of both Russia and the US to veto, the Security Council, which is supposed to be the ultimate point for the UN, is frozen. If the US wants something, the USSR stop it, and vice versa. Now, a little bit of a historical reminder for people who don't remember what the Cold War was essentially about. It was a fight between two ideologies, and when I say was, I actually mean is. It is a fight between two ideologies. One believes in the West, in freedom and individual rights, in democracies. The other believes in communism, state control, and collective rule. These two things essentially really negate each other, and this is a fight that is going on until this day, even if the official Cold War is behind us. Now, following the intensity of the World Wars, the Cold War keeps the US in focus, fighting against an enemy, but in a way that feels much more palatable to the West. Less killings, less feelings of war. It's a shadow war done diplomatically and in conversations behind the scenes. The US is strengthened ideologically by the Russian enemy, sharpening its knowledge of what it believes in and what it wants to fight for. But the UN is a completely different story. Since the UN couldn't actually stop wars between big powers, it invented something new to remain useful: peacekeeping. The idea is, we can't stop you from fighting, but if you stop on your own, we'll send guys in hats to stand in the middle so you don't start again. And once again, if that sounds pathetic and ineffective, you're not wrong. This is also where the boring structural stuff starts to explode. Since the UN can't solve wars, it focuses on everything else: health and weather and development, and mainly bureaucracy. It grows and grows because it's the only part of the UN that's actually allowed to move and do something. Which brings us quite quickly to the 1990s. It's a miracle. The West in America wins. The USSR is dissolved. The war, the Cold War, is now behind us. And the West, thinking that it had actually won, begins to truly lose its way. They say easy times create weak men. Well, it's true of countries as well. America, without its ideological enemy, starts to lose the direction that it had. And the UN, realizing that it has finally solved its veto problems, starts getting involved in actual wars. Newsflash, it's a total disaster. Take Rwanda, for example. The UN peacekeepers are on the ground during a genocide, but they have no mandate to use force. They literally watch as 800,000 people are killed because the forum in New York couldn't agree to change the rules. Or in Bosnia, where the UN created safe areas where Dutch peacekeepers were there to protect civilians. However, when the attackers show up, the UN don't fight back. They stood by and watched 8,000 men and boys get executed. And of course, in Somalia, where the UN and the US attempted some sort of combined mission to feed the people and stop the civil war, and it just ends up with tens of US soldiers killed, hundreds of Somalians murdered, and the public outcry across the US that this is not an effective way to be using the American military. Simply put, the UN can't actually solve conflicts. So once again, it pivots. In the early 2000s, and truthfully till this day, it decides to do two main things. First, to become the moral judge. Since it can't stop the wars, it starts calling out war crimes instead, basically becoming a giant finger pointer. And it also goes all in on its specialized agencies. They turn themselves into a service provider, basically saying to countries, you might hate our politics, but you need us to regulate your planes and your mail, so use us. Of course, they only need about $70 billion to do so, and they're also now overly invested in becoming essential and permanent fixtures in global crises. Meaning, hint, hint, they don't actually gain from the crises resolving themselves, but rather they want them to keep going so that they can prove that they are essential to world peace. But who am I to get political? Let's stay focused. Just like the UN becomes a joke, so too at the same time, the West is becoming less and less credible by the day. With entities like NATO and the UN, individual countries, especially in Europe, are becoming less and less self-dependent. They start drastically cutting their military budgets, their production ones as well, because a big part of these communal organizations stems from this failing idea. one that we like to call multilateralism. This is the idea that everyone can and should get a seat at the table and that the rules should be the same for everybody, and everybody is collectively going to fight to help everybody, meaning the individual is actually not that important anymore. In reality, this doesn't work so well. If the UK can be totally dependent on Denmark and Germany's military, why would they invest in their own? And hint, hint, they don't. They stop, and then as individual entities, they become unbelievably weak. And add on to this the fact that it is really slow. If you need everyone to agree on something, this creates serious bureaucratic problems. If you have 195 people sitting around a table and all of them need to agree on how to resolve a conflict, guess what? That conflict's not getting resolved. But that's actually the less significant problem. What happens if not everybody agrees to the rules being set? If you have players who have decided that they fundamentally disagree with this philosophy and that they want to strengthen themselves as individual entities, i.e., they don't believe in the Western mentality of collectivism and everybody working together. They think that they should be strengthening themselves as individuals. Guess what? They get stronger. Enter into the chat BRICS, BRICS, it's an acronym. And whilst the West is busy discussing these ideas like multiculturalism and eroding its own value systems and abilities, its enemies are very busy watching and learning. Now, chances are you haven't even heard of BRICS, but that's not going to be the case for long, as they are very quickly becoming a serious part of our reality. In 2001, an economist coined the term after Brazil, Russia, India, and China, claiming that they would become the world economic superpowers, and this became a term in the economic world. It's only in 2009 that these countries, liking this BRICS term, turned this into a political group. They then added South Africa and stayed with only 5 players until 2024, when they started seriously expanding, adding Egypt, Indonesia, UAE, and other regions into their coalitions. So what is BRICS really about? Well, they believe something essentially different to the UN. They believe in multipolarity, which means they want a world with multiple centers of power, rather than just one. And yes, if you're starting to understand that they are looking to compete directly with the West and with the United States explicitly, you are absolutely correct. How do they want to do this? Well, first, by minimizing the US power, which starts, as you now know, with the dollar. Because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, and you can check out more about this in our previous episode that we did on this show, the US can use sanctions to cut countries like Russia or Iran out of the global economy. BRICS wants to trade in their own currencies, like rupees, to make sure that no single country can turn off their bank accounts. To do this, they have their own banking systems, which doesn't have human rights conditions like the World Bank does, and has a massive rainy day fund to help members out if their currency crashes so they don't go to the US. They also have a deeply un-Western way of looking at money. BRICS operates on a no questions asked policy. They believe that how a country treats its own citizens is its own business. They don't interfere. And BRICS has now become a proper economic coalition. The idea is to provide countries a form of competition to the West, but most importantly, to not be dependent on the West anymore. They realize something that Trump has started to realize as well, that we've ignored reality. The Old West, these European countries that once were the pride of civilization, have honestly become a bit of a cautionary tale, and they're looking into the future. These countries, like Europe, have been overrun by radical Islamic takeovers that their own leaders are refusing to name and deal with, and their economies are flatlining. Most of them have less GDP per capita today than they did 20 years ago. And whilst they're struggling to even grow at 1% a year, BRICS countries are now growing at almost 4% a year. But it's even worse than that, because BRICS manages about 43% of the global economy. Now, we're used to a reality in which we think of the West as the strongest entity in the world, but the BRICS countries, like Russia, Brazil, China, and India, are quickly catching up, whilst the West is stuck in their old mentalities. like the UN. European countries and even America traded their energy independence and their borders for optics and multiculturalism, inviting in all different entities, and honestly, these countries have become unrecognizable. If America wants to avoid that same drain and stay a serious power, they're going to have to stop playing by the rules of other big players, not the rules that they become accustomed to. Economy, money, and raw resources are now the new reality. Playing by the rules that don't actually exist because half of the world isn't playing by them anyway is a problem that the West has slowly been starting to wake up to. And when I say the West, I specifically mean President Donald Trump of the United States. Which brings us to present-day Davos, where at the World Economic Forum, President Trump made his enormous Board of Peace announcement. I think many people have missed the significance of this, choosing to focus on the fine print. We want to know what exactly Jared Kushner has planned for the Gaza skyline, but this is a massive shift strategically. The board itself is now looking to completely undercut the UN as competition. Okay, what do I mean by this? Instead of having everyone as part of the conversation, this is a pay-to-play model. To secure a permanent seat, countries are reportedly paying a $1 billion membership fee after having 3 years of involvement. This is only for people who can pay and who are willing to move fast on solutions without the bureaucracy. Of course, Trump is the head of it. Specifically, the charter names him chairman for life. This gives him more power potentially than the US president because he has the sole power to fire members or set the agenda. This is a coalition of peace, which instead of focusing on conversations and diplomacy, believes that the right economic incentives can keep peace instead. It's shifting from this whole multiculturalism idea of equality and into transactionalism. It's politics, but it's built like a business model, which is where we know that Trump excels. With only those who bring something to the table being part of the questions and the debates for the future of the world. It treats international relationships not as a long-term marriage based on shared values, but as a series of one-off deals. Under this worldview, the question isn't, is this legal under international law, but rather, what is the return on investment for my country right now? Okay. That was a whole lot of hullabaloo, but let's actually talk about what this means. Because this board was created to solve the Gaza issue. But as you may have noticed by now, that's not the only thing that they're looking to do. That's a small example of their big plan. So let's take the Gaza Executive Board, which is a small group within this peace board. Whilst the UN spent decades stuck in the veto problem, the GEB, the Gaza board, operates like a reconstruction firm. The lineup isn't diplomats and discussions about how UNRWA can be feeding the Palestinians. It's people like Jared Kushner, Mark Rubio, Steve Witkoff, and billionaire Mark Rowan, along with Tony Blair. Now, they're completely ignoring legitimacy in favor of a 20-point business plan aimed at building shimmering towers and a new coastline. They're basically saying, let's stop discussing all the laws and what's right and what's wrong. Let's actually build this out effectively, quickly, and in a way that everybody benefits from. Make it into a business deal. And they're completely uninterested in the discussions around international law because to them, it's a facade. International law only works if you have somebody who can actually maintain the law and order, which nobody can do on an international scale. I mean, let's just look for a second at what's going on in Greenland. Trump has set a February 1st deadline for Denmark and the European allies to either negotiate the purchase of Greenland or face tariffs starting at 10% and moving to 25%. He's using economic warfare against our own allies because the old system is dead. In 1920s, the world tried idealism with the League, and in 1945, the world tried multilateralism with the UN and NATO, and in 2026, the world, led by the Davos announcement, is trying transactionalism. The Board of Peace isn't pretending to be a global family. It's operating on the idea that if you make war too expensive and peace too profitable through real estate and mineral rights, the big players will stay in line because it's good for business. Which leads us to the big next question. The League of Nations failed because it has no power, and the UN is still struggling because its power is divided. Will a board of peace succeed because it treats global stability like a business? Note how many participants in BRICS are joining this, while the West is being cautious. As of now, the board has 19 founding participants who have actually signed the charter in Davos. We are talking about major players like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Indonesia, and Argentina, alongside others like Hungary, Azerbaijan, and Qatar. Even Russia has signaled that it is studying the invitation, although they're playing a little bit of a game. These are players who understand that the wind is changing. But then look at the other side, the nervous ones, the leaders of what I call the Weak Europe coalition. You have Emmanuel Macron in France, who has already said he has no intention of joining because it undermines the UN. You have Merz in Germany and Cooper in the UK, all clutching at their pearls over constitutional issues and Russian involvement. They are so stuck in the 1945 mindset that they're literally watching the world move on without them. They'd rather go down with the sinking ship of the UN than admit that Trump's new model is the only thing that might potentially keep peace, because we have not succeeded in keeping peace in the last 70 years. These countries, again, weakened by an old mentality that doesn't work, are choosing optics over survival. What Trump is saying is actually seriously simple. He believes that peace and diplomacy and this model doesn't work. It hasn't been effective and it won't be effective. But businesses are effective. And if you can shift diplomacy into a new economic reality, you might actually have a chance. By the way, how is he getting people to join his board? He's bullying them economically. He's saying, you're going to be receiving extra tariffs if you don't join my board of peace. Once again, using money, oil, raw minerals to shift the way that people see things, because his essential core belief is that money is what makes the world go round. And if you want to shift the world into a better place, you need to use economic incentives to do so. The mistake the West is currently doing is that besides the fact that they're not looking at their complete economic failure and focusing in on the other countries that are succeeding every single day in growing their economy, they're looking at this as another crazy Trump idea. But in essence, he is saying, if we don't play by the rules of the games being dictated by the likes of BRICS, Russia, and China, we are going to lose completely because the West is stuck in the past. It's not yet clear, by the way, if he is right. And I definitely have my reservations. I'm not comfortable with this idea. It makes me feel a little bit odd to think that you're going to have Trump leading this board basically on his own. And what happens when he dies? Who replaces it? How does this entire system work? But what I am clear upon is that the way that the West has worked, the way that the UN has worked, the way that we have done things up until this point has failed abysmally. And that something that our enemies is doing is working better. Now, I've also seen that the economy is such a massive player in so many of our decisions that this is actually a pretty safe bet to make, to assume that if you can push people's economics need, you'll actually create the world politics that the world needs for peace. Now, what's interesting is to notice that Israel is thinking along the same lines. It's working hard to become a proper player at the big boys' table, looking to create themselves as an economic superpower. Now, they're also enforcing their military and proving to the world that technologically we are absolutely essential and building out our world trade. But our economy is a hyper focus at the moment. And the relationships that we're working to build all have diplomatic ramifications. We're creating a reality in which economically we are so important that countries have to be our friends and have to be at peace with Israel, because if they're not, they're going to lose out. This is kind of similar to what Trump is doing, but Trump is a little bit of a complicated character, and people are reticent to just jump in on his new idea. Netanyahu, by the way, has been asked and has agreed to join the coalition, which I actually think is important. Even though we have Turkey and Qatar on board, which are our enemies. Anything else would be seen as a snub to the United States. And the countries know this. This is Trump's way. He is using his leverage to push people even if they aren't sure to join, hoping to make this a real force that can act effectively very quickly. And yes, if you ask me, this board announcement that happened in Davos just a few days ago has a lot to do with his delaying the attack on Iran. Waiting for this to be launched and then showing the world how he means business is a pretty solid business plan. Look, this all kind of ties together. If you wonder to yourself why we aren't seeing peace in the way that we expect, or so many world conflicts have erupted, it's because of how weak the West has become. And this is a move to show them that that time is over. Russia invading Ukraine was a test of the Russians to see how the West would act, as was Hamas in Gaza. They were trying to see what their reaction would be. And same too with China potentially invading Taiwan. They are testing Western's military abilities, psychological abilities, and unity. And the truth is, we failed. Trump knows this, and he's been doing a lot over the last year to recreate a West that looks strong, but most importantly, has the economic upper hand. This explains Venezuela, this now explains Greenland, this explains the tariffs, and a lot of the negotiations that we've seen with the Middle East. He believes that making war not worthwhile financially is the smartest way to keep war at bay, to keep the peace, and to keep the West strong. The most obvious flaw in the plan, to me, is the fact that money might be able to buy out communists and other ideological agendas, but I'm not so sure about the radical jihadis. I think we are wrong in the thinking that makes us believe economic interests are above religious pursuits. It's a lesson that Israel's kind of learned, that if you just funnel money to your enemies, they're not going to become more likable. They're just going to wait for you to give them as much as they can to build themselves out and then attack you. But if we can present ourselves as the strong ones, the ones who can't be pushed over, the ones who have the military abilities and the chutzpah to fight back, specifically economically, the jihadis might actually take note. I mean, a whole bunch of the Arab countries have already joined, and I guess we will soon find out. Is the old adage true? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer? Is this the new reality that we are looking at? I mean, again, time will tell. What we're now seeing is in 1945, a decision was made to create these enormous organizations that don't work in the hopes that they would incentivize peace. It has failed colossally as a system. And we've got new entities who are saying, whilst we don't like the reality of playing these games, which might seem a little dictatorshipy and not exactly aligned with the rules of the West, we might not have any other opportunity. We might not have a choice because the West has fallen so badly that these countries are growing and growing and growing. And if we don't start to play on that level and remove the entities that are stopping us, as the UN is, then we are going to be in trouble. This is the bet that Trump is taking, and I'm interested to hear. Do you think that this is effective, that this is wise, that this might actually be the chance that the West has? Or are we just seeing new leadership falling for the idea that the more power they have, the more silent the world will be, and will once again be a little bit bitten by this theory? I'm not so sure, but that's where we're at now. We're seeing a complete shift. The world peace idea that we all believe in and we all want, it's not working. We now live in a reality in which if you don't have the economic upper hand, which is more important than the diplomatic upper hand, you are going to fail. And the West has to start doing something drastic to shift. Is this going to be it? Only time will tell. I'm Ira Kay, and I will see you next time.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and as you can see, I'm not in studio this week. I'm in Mexico City. Very shortly, I'll be bringing you an exclusive interview with the Israeli ambassador to Mexico to speak about her experience being targeted directly with an assassination plot by the Islamic Republic of Iran. But before we get to that interview, I want to discuss just a few things, the big stories that happened this week that I couldn't wait a whole week to speak with you about.
First things first, we have an update about the reality on the ground inside of Iran, because what the regime is reporting to the world doesn't match at all what doctors and witnesses, even that I have spoken to on the ground, have been reporting about what's happening. Now, we know that right now President Trump has said executions that are set to begin inside of Iran were actually stopped. He reported that 800 executions had been canceled. Now, the problem is that the regime itself is openly contradicting that claim by President Trump. We've seen judiciary officials and regime officials, regime-aligned media even publicly denying that any executions were stopped. And in addition to that, we know that there have been numerous executions almost every single day in the past week. Beyond that, there have also been countless extrajudicial killings, which are ongoing, and more on that later. They've also pledged that they will be executing what they call enemies of the state, which, as we know, refers to any protesters. On the ground, doctors inside of Iran are describing something that's very different than what the regime is trying to put forward as the reality of what happened during these protests. There's one physician who told the international media that hospitals are not only overwhelmed with protesters who have been shot and killed at close range with live ammunition, but that we're also seeing a phenomena of gunshot wounds to the chest, to the neck, and to the head in particular, meaning that these regime forces were targeting civilians. Medical staff also say that security forces in many cases have entered the hospitals to arrest injured protesters, and in some cases they have actually executed them. They've also tear-gassed hospitals, and they have taken over hospitals completely, apparently, according to sources on the ground, all of the public hospitals as well as some of the private hospitals. Doctors are reporting being monitored, being threatened, being forced not to treat injured protesters, and of course, not to speak to media. Now, what we know so far is that according to multiple independent reports, more than 36,500 protesters have been killed in this wave of protests. We also see that medical workers are saying the number, as well as all the sources that I've spoken to in the past few weeks, say the numbers are significantly higher than even that 30,000 count, because the regime is doing so much to hide their crimes. It's part of the reason that there's been no internet connectivity, with the exception of those who have special access because they're inside the regime, for over 20 days. Now, while Trump is being told that executions have stopped, regime officials are literally doing the exact opposite, or saying the exact opposite publicly. In recent weeks, senior figures and state-aligned outlets have renewed threats tied to U.S. support for Iranian protesters and Israel, including explicit warnings about any kind of retaliation against American assets and interests in the Middle East. We've also even seen in the past week regime officials threatening President Trump himself. Now, the executions of these protesters is happening after the protests end, which is one of the more alarming things about the phenomenon we're seeing now. And one of those people targeted was Hamid Hamidian. This is someone that I knew personally. Hamid's final post on X was a direct appeal to the U.S. President Trump to act in support of the Iranian people. Now, 2 days later, after this tweet, he was shot and killed in a protest. These are not random acts that are happening. The people, the public, the civilians who are protesting are being identified and eliminated quietly once the cameras are gone, which is part of the reason that the regime has been so determined to shut off the internet during this cause. Which brings me to the next story I want to talk about today. While Iranians are being killed on the ground, the Islamic Republic is running a coordinated influence operation that is abroad, that is designed to control how the world understands what's happening inside of Iran. They're trying to control the narrative, which is part of the reason that the internet has been off for almost 3 weeks. Now, the only people who have access to internet now, by and large, unless they figured out a workaround, are people who have what's called white SIMs. The regime has granted a specific filtered internet to people who are inside the regime, which of course is presenting a skewed perspective and reality of what's actually happening on the ground inside Iran. Now, a company called Golden Owl did a research project to investigate some of these influence operations, and here is an update about what they found just this past week.
Now, Golden Owl's investigation makes one thing clear right from the very start. This isn't an organic online debate happening. It's a structured, state-aligned information, or really disinformation operation that's operating at scale. It's primarily running on X, or at least that's what Golden Owl investigate, and it's aimed overwhelmingly at Western audiences rather than Iranians who are inside of the country. Now, Golden Owl analyzed thousands of accounts on X and identified a two-tier network. At its core were several hundred originator accounts. These were responsible for repeating or creating, the narratives that the Islamic Republic wants to promote. And then surrounding them, there were thousands of amplifier accounts that would rapidly retweet or repost, like, comment, and push that same narrative, that same content into the coordinated waves of this disinformation campaign. Now, posting patterns were synchronized, repetitive, and even timed around key events, including, of course, protest escalations, reports of executions, international condemnation that the regime may have been facing at various points, as well as the discussion about sanctions. Now, one of the most damning findings that Golden Owl found in this whole scenario is that issue of timing. So they documented that this network remained highly active even during internet shutdowns inside of Iran. So while ordinary Iranians couldn't post or live stream or communicate in any way whatsoever with the outside world, these accounts were still able to operate at full capacity. Now, this strongly suggests that the operation was either being run from outside of Iran or they had privileged access that wasn't available to ordinary citizens. Now, Golden Owl categorized the content that was being pushed by this network into clear categories, into clear buckets. So I'm going to take you through each one just so you understand what you're seeing when you see these kinds of claims being made in the media. First, there's the pro-regime and pro-IRGC propaganda. This is content that's praising the Islamic Republic leadership, that's glorifying the IRGC, while the protester deaths are denied or minimized or, in some cases, dismissed outright. The second category of content that we see is the delegitimization of the uprising itself. Protesters are being framed as violent or foreign-backed, chaotic, or somehow manipulated, with the goal of making the entire movement appear morally ambiguous and, politically dangerous. Now, the third category that we see are targeted attacks on opposition figures, particularly the supporters of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. We've seen countless smears and conspiracy theories and ridicule against both him and his supporters that have been used really for years, but in particular in the last few weeks to weaken the most unified Iranian opposition that we have seen in many years. And this is an attempt to divide the opposition that finally is standing united. Now, the fourth category is that opposition fragmentation specifically. We saw that accounts were amplifying separatist rhetoric, meaning people who were advocating for the division of Iran based on certain ethnic groups, or fringe ideological disputes and identity-based divisions. Now, the researchers who conducted this at Golden Owl were clear that this content was not meant to empower minorities or something like that, rather to fracture opposition unity and strengthen the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is actually consistent with what we've seen from them for the past 47 years. The fifth category is anti-Western and even anti-Semitic messaging. This was a plethora of content that blamed Israel, Jews, and in some cases the United States for the unrest inside of Iran, deflecting attention away from the regime's violence at home. These are people who were tweeting at accounts like mine, saying awful, heinous things, sending death threats, all kind of hate speech like this. And then we have the sixth category, which is Western narrative targeting. Now, many of the accounts openly declared that their locations were in the US, UK, Germany, and Canada, even if they were on VPN, according to what those accounts say, which would confirm, again, that the primary audience of this influence operation were journalists or policymakers or activists of some kind, basically the Western public, not the Iranian public. And that's important to understand because you're not getting the true story when you're getting it from the Islamic regime. Now, the Golden Owl also identified several behavioral markers that were consistent with coordinated or semi-automated control. including unnatural posting frequency, recycled phrasing that appeared in thousands of tweets, as well as synchronized surges of content across time zones. Basically, what Golden Owl exposed is narrative warfare. There's physical repression at home against the Iranian people, paired with information cleanup that's happening abroad. So their goal is to kill the protester inside of Iran and then flood your timeline with false information about what's happening, all empowered by a complete internet shutdown in Tehran, and then dominating the conversation in London or Paris or Washington with their propagandists, including people like Trita Parsi, who are part of Nayak. Now, once again, this narrative laundering is happening in real time. This mass repression that we're seeing in Iran is being reframed by them as stability, and state violence is becoming law enforcement. Which brings me to my next story I want to talk about very briefly, but important to mention, the media on Iran. This has been an ongoing failure, very similar to what we see when it comes to Israel and their reporting, but one of the loudest criticisms right now is directed at the BBC, and deservedly so. Across social media and commentary, we've seen people asking why the massive protests in the case of London reported 100,000 people, as well as the mass killings inside of Iran and the prolonged internet shutdowns in Iran, are barely registering on the BBC's coverage. Viewers have shared screenshots from the front pages of BBC and broadcasts showing Iran completely absent, or I guess in some cases minimized, but on the BBC there was nothing, while other global stories receive wall-to-wall attention, including, by the way, anything that happens in Gaza. Now, critics argue that difficulty accessing Iran is not really an excuse, and I would confirm that as a journalist, because outlets routinely use open source footage. Not only that, they could use footage from before. They don't need the actual footage to report what's happening in the news, which is what their job is. They can report witness testimonies, they can speak to other diaspora activists who are in touch with their families. And the concern that's being raised repeatedly is that caution has crossed into de facto self-censorship that ultimately is aiding the Islamic Republic of Iran itself. And then there's the issue of VOA Farsi, which is funded by U.S. taxpayers and something really important for the American public to understand. It's meant to provide uncensored information to Iranians. It's a critical tool for oppressive regimes that have limited access to information, like in Cuba or in Iran. But the journalists who have been working there, as well as others who have relations with them, have complained recently about the censorship of support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has been, in a way, systematically erased from any coverage since the new takeover. Now, chance interviews and statements that reflect the real popular support for the Crown Prince inside Iran are being actively downplayed or, in some cases, omitted by VOA Farsi. The head of VOA Farsi, Ali Javanmardi, has been widely criticized for his own separatist views, his own political views on Iranian political issues, and other Iranian journalists and diaspora media figures are speaking up. They're outraged that Kari Lake put this person into such a position and for allowing him to let his personal political views shape editorial decisions. Now, this concern has been raised with thousands of social media posts, just that I've seen alone. Yet instead of addressing those concerns, the leadership has closed ranks. Kari Lake, whether it's out of ignorance or malice, has defended Ali, despite growing backlash that VOA Farsi is no longer reflecting the voice of the Iranian people. In fact, it's censoring it. They've also recently decided to start removing all sound from any of the footage that's coming from the protests inside of Iran, simply in order to avoid the accusation that they are censoring support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. No one's buying that. It's not working. Kari Lake, do your job. And now let's talk about something that has been infuriating Iranians for many, many years. The regime officials living in luxury abroad, along with their families, of course. Now, in previous episodes, I've reported about Ali Ansari, but this week we learned just how extensive his network really is. An investigation in the Financial Times this week revealed that Ansari, who is an Iranian banker sanctioned by the UK for alleged ties to the IRGC, has built a European property empire worth around 400 million euros. Now, British authorities had already frozen his UK assets, including a London property portfolio that's valued at more than £150. You can check out that episode where I broke down exactly how he did that. But the new investigation from the Financial Times uncovered far more. His European assets include a luxury golf resort in Mallorca, a ski hotel in Austria, several high-end hotels in Frankfurt, and a major shopping center in Germany. All, of course, hidden behind offshore shell companies in jurisdictions like St. Kitts and Nevis or Luxembourg. Now, in cases like this, we may not know exactly where every single dollar comes from, but we do know that the regime uses their elites to create complex financial structures and offshore entities, and they use their family members to move money out of Iran to shield assets and to maintain access to Western financial systems in order to evade sanctions. We recently saw this dynamic on full display with the lavish wedding of Ali Shamkhani's daughter in the United States. Well, now attention has returned to the Larijani family, one of the most powerful dynasties within the Islamic Republic's system. In the United States, there's Fatima Larijani, who until last week was employed at Emory University. She was fired following public exposure and backlash, which was the right step, but it shouldn't end there. This is someone who never should have been admitted into the United States in the first place. Deportation needs to happen. But let's look over at the UK. In the UK, there's Hadi Larijani, who lives openly and works as a professor of philosophy at one of the universities there in Scotland, holding academic positions while his family has been deeply embedded in Iran's judiciary and political power structure. Beyond that, another relative of Larijani is listed as an officer of the company Pill Sorted, holding British nationality. Why do the children of regime officials have British, or in some cases Canadian, or in some cases American citizenship? Now, it's true, we don't know the full origin of every dollar that flows through these companies, but we do know how the regime works, and we know that regime elites rely on those family members. They rely on foreign residency, on foreign citizenship, as well as those Western legal systems to protect the wealth that they extracted, and when I say extracted, I mean stole, from Iran, while ordinary Iranians continue to pay the price. That's why calls are continuing to grow to investigate these networks, to freeze assets where appropriate, to expel the ambassadors and the diplomats of the Islamic Republic, to revoke visas that are tied to sanctioned or corrupt regimes, and to hold this regime accountable. This isn't ordinary migration or immigration that we're talking about. We're talking about the intentional laundering of regime power into Western systems. And last but not least, we have our final story of the day. After 843 days, the last hostage, Ron Gvili, has been brought home. With his return for the first time in 12 years, there are no Israeli hostages left in Gaza. And wow, I have waited a long time to say that sentence. Ron was a soldier. He was the first one in to save people. He was the last one out. He was killed on the 7th, and his body was held for years as a bargaining chip by terrorists, sponsored by the Islamic Republic. His family waited painfully for nearly 2.5 years to bring him home for a proper burial. Now, Ron's return was delayed because Hamas claimed that they didn't know the whereabouts of his body. This is something that Israel completely rejected, and it turns out they were right. Terrorist organizations will always negotiate in bad faith and weaponize the good faith of those who have to negotiate with them against them. Well, that's it for Axis of Truth this week. I'll be back next week with more updates, more interviews, and more stories from the Middle East.
And we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israeli updates on your WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen now to join.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in, with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all the biggest headlines from the region. And now, war or no war? That is the big question. With the possibility of a U.S. attack, the U.S. and Iran may be heading towards talks instead of war. Israel's Channel 12 reports that the United States and Iran have quietly informed each other they are ready to enter negotiations aimed at diffusing the current crisis. A senior American official says President Trump's public calls for a deal are genuine and not a deception ahead of a military strike. Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar are now working to organize a meeting this week between envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian officials. The diplomatic push comes as Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. attack would spark a regional war. Take a listen to Trump's comments.
Sir, on Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Do you have any response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
And now the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has officially reopened today for the first time since the Gaza war. The crossing has been closed for around 2 years. The pedestrian-only passage is part of a limited reopening under the ceasefire agreement, which came after yesterday's system test at the crossing. Exit from Gaza will be monitored remotely by Israel using facial recognition technology, while entry into Gaza from Egypt will include Israeli security screening at an IDF checkpoint. Israel stresses the crossing will not be used for aid or goods. Those deliveries will continue to flow through other Israeli-screened routes. And continuing with Gaza, the IDF says a terror operative was killed after crossing the ceasefire line in southern Gaza and posing an immediate threat to Israeli troops. According to the military, several operatives crossed the so-called yellow line and approached IDF soldiers in a suspicious and threatening manner. The IDF says troops identified the danger and opened the fire to remove the threat, killing one of the operatives. Palestinian media reported that a 63-year-old man was killed in a drone strike near Rafah on the Israeli-controlled side of the ceasefire line. Nikolai Mladenov, who is the High Representative on the Board of Peace, said he is deeply concerned by the events that have been going on since Friday. These events include both Hamas terrorists emerging from a tunnel in Rafah and Israeli strikes that he said tragically also killed civilians. Mladenov called on all sides to show restraint. And now someone has a birthday today. That's right, Israel's Knesset is turning 60 today. The Knesset is marking 60 years since the inauguration of its building with a special open house celebration held on the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat. More than 2,000 visitors are expected at Israel's parliament, including soldiers, police officers, Holocaust survivors, and students from schools and kindergartens across the country. Visitors will tour the building, some guided by new Knesset robots, and receive commemorative gift bags, a nod to the original 1966 inauguration. And in sports news, the Portland Trailblazers star Deni Avdija has become the first ever Israeli selected to the NBA All-Star Game. It's a milestone moment for Israeli sports. The 25-year-old forward, who grew up on a kibbutz in northern Israel, was named a Western Conference All-Star reserve after a breakout season that put him among the NBA's elite. Superstars, including LeBron James, have praised his rise. Back home in Israel, fans are celebrating a dream come true.
How much you work, how much pride are you feeling with this honor?
I'm proud, and I just remember all the journey that I came a long way. I wasn't in the easiest situations throughout my career, and I started playing basketball without a dream, and just pursue it, and just see wherever it takes me.
And finally, for some exciting archaeological news, a 2,000-year-old pilgrimage road leading to the Temple Mount has officially opened to the public for the first time. The road, known as the Pilgrimage Road, has been under excavation for nearly 20 years by archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority. Researchers believe it was built in the early years of the Common Era, either during the reign of King Herod or under Roman governor Pontius Pilate. In ancient times, this was the main route used by Jewish pilgrims ascending from the south of Jerusalem to the Temple Mount. The stone-paved path served as a central artery for religious life in the city more than 2 millennia ago. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. And as today is the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, we at ILTV wish you a happy holiday. I'm India Naftali. Thanks for watching.
Today marks 30 days since the protests in Iran began, and the country is now entering its third week of a near total internet blackout. The reality is that the Middle East experts believe that without genuine military intervention, the Iranian regime's chances of survival remain very high. Iranians cannot topple this regime alone.
President Trump, as we know, said that help is on the way. That's obvious. That's objective. Now, what will happen, of course, remains to be seen, but it is unlikely that we would send effectively a wartime level of assets to the region to just absolutely do nothing and stand on a defensive posture.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Off the Record. This is a place where we go beyond the headlines, cut through the noise, and examine the stories shaping our world with context, facts, and honesty. Today marks 30 days since the protests in Iran began, and the country is now entering its third week of a near total internet blackout. As a result, no one has been able to independently verify the true scale of death and destruction caused by the regime's crackdown. Quite frankly, I haven't been able to find a single credible analysis or prediction of how the situation may unfold in the coming weeks. The disinformation surrounding Iran right now feels almost intentional, designed to obscure reality and overwhelm the truth, and of course, to keep the US's plans as ambiguous as possible. What is clear, however, is that the clouds of war are still looming over Tehran. US President Donald Trump has made it clear that military action remains on the table. At this point, there's still no official death toll in Iran, precisely because independent verification is impossible. The US-based human rights activist news agency says that so far it's verified about 5,459 deaths, while professionals collecting available data from hospitals and medical teams report figures closer to 36,000 fatalities. Those numbers are compiled from classified documents, field reports, and accounts from medical staff, witnesses, and the victims' families. It is believed that the majority of these killings occurred on January 8th and 9th, when we saw what officials described as a dramatic spike in deaths. During those days, regime security forces reportedly opened fire on protesters nationwide, including the use of snipers positioned on rooftops and trucks mounted with heavy machine guns. According to officials, the death toll was so high that evacuation systems collapsed, body bags ran out, and heavy trucks were used in place of ambulances. There's also evidence received, including photos, that some people were executed by security forces while receiving treatment for their injuries in hospitals. Additionally, local accounts in Iran indicate that the regime is withholding bodies to use as propaganda, possibly preparing for a potential escalation with the US so that they could later claim those deaths were caused by US strikes. At the same time, opposition outlets are also reporting that the regime's security forces pressured Iranian medical staff to alter hospital records, downplaying gunfire deaths and changing the causes of death to obscure the scale of the crackdown. If this is true, this would represent yet another attempt by the regime to conceal its crimes from the international community. Now, all of this is awful and difficult to swallow, and we've spent weeks discussing what can be done to help Iranians at this time. And the reality is that the Middle East experts believe that without genuine military intervention, the Iranian regime's chances of survival remain very high. Iranians cannot topple this regime alone. Based on what little we have been able to see, it is clear there appears to be no limit to what the regime is willing to do to its own people. So the question remains, how does one effectively topple a regime that's prepared to kill even hundreds of thousands of its own citizens to stay in power? Meanwhile, there are new reports that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has moved into a special underground shelter in Tehran after military and security officials in Iran assessed an increased risk of a potential U.S. attack. If military action were taken to topple the regime, Khamenei would be the number one target. He has ruled the country for 36 years, dictating Iran's nuclear ambitions, its support for terrorist organizations across the Middle East, and the systematic repression of his own people. The underground facility is described as a heavily fortified site with interconnected tunnels. According to these reports, Masoud Khamenei, the Supreme Leader's third son, has assumed day-to-day management of his father's office, and it now serves as the primary channel of communication with the executive branches of government. Other potential targets reportedly include senior leaders in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij, including Mohammed Pakpour, who is set to be the new commander of the Revolutionary Guard. Despite the fact that the regime pretends to act like a legitimate government, Khamenei effectively rules Iran through appointments, militias, and various bodies. Israel's daily newspaper, Israel Hayom, published a detailed explanation that outlines all of the potential targets that the U.S. could target, and I highly recommend you all read it. They explained that as far back as the previous decade, reports spoke of a secret list of successors, and many Iranian experts believe it is more likely going to be a military figure from the Revolutionary Guard that would rise to power. Alongside Mohammed Pakpour are other senior figures in the Revolutionary Guard and military who are personally loyal to Khomeini and are appointed by the Supreme Leader himself. These include Gholam Ali Rashid, head of the emergency headquarters appointed after his two predecessors were killed, Army Commander Amir Hatami, who rose through the Basij and was integrated into the military by Khomeini, and Abdul Rahim Mossavi, Chief of Staff of the Army and the Revolutionary Guards. But beyond the government and military echelons, the U.S. could also potentially attack the regime's main instrument of repression, the Basij. For those of you who don't know, the Basij is a regime-organized mass militia made up largely of civilian volunteers that operates under the command of Iranian's Revolutionary Guard. It is locally based in schools, universities, workplaces, and neighborhoods, and is used to monitor society, intimidate dissent, and physically suppress protests, acting as the regime's primary tool for day-to-day control. In the videos that we see of armed forces dressed in civilian clothes that are attacking protesters, or those thugs in motorbikes ramming through crowds and shooting protesters, those are the Basij. Alongside regime figures, the U.S. could also target a number of strategic sites, intelligence, security, police, and oil infrastructure sites. Now again, there's no telling what the U.S. is actually planning, whether or not there's a concrete operation against Iran, or if Washington has just decided to wait this out for the headlines to move on and for public attention to shift elsewhere. But what we do know is that one of the president's main reasons for halting an attack no longer appears to be true. On January 14th, at a press conference, Trump told reporters that the regime had halted planned executions of Iranian protesters. But Israeli intelligence has reportedly presented contradictory evidence. Now, it turns out that the source that claimed that the executions were no longer proceeding came from Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. However, intelligence obtained by the U.S. administration with the assistance of Israel includes what described as unequivocal evidence that the executions did, in fact, take place. We've also been monitoring the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier of the United States Navy. It is under the responsibility of CENTCOM, and it's been making its way to the Oman Gulf. From what we understand, it will take several more days to up to a week for the carrier strike to reach within striking distance of Iran. To help us make more sense of all of this, we are joined by Travis Hawley. Travis is a former intelligence analyst in the U.S. Air Force and the National Security Agency. He was also a Hebrew translator and media analyst at the U.S. Central Command CENTCOM. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I think I need to let our audience know that it's very early for you. And I, at the last minute, because of the situation going on, asked you while you were still sleeping to come on the show. So I really, really appreciate that you're here. I want you to start off by telling our audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Sure. So my background is I did intelligence in the U.S. Air Force and additionally at the National Security Agency. My focus was on Middle East, North Africa. And I also was a Hebrew translator and a media analyst at U.S. Central Command. Nowadays, I'm actually just running my own business, an open source intelligence business, digital investigations. And on the side, I'm doing some analysis on national security issues, whether here domestically in the U.S. or as we see it now, the wars that are continually happening in the Middle East.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, you were in Israel on October 7th and during the Iran war.
Yeah, people jokingly say that anytime I'm in Israel, there's probably going to be a war happening. So maybe that won't be the case this time, but I had the unfortunate luck of being there both times. That's right.
When he says people, he means me. I'm one of people that says that about Travis. So I want to ask you first off about any parallels that you're seeing between the sort of disinformation campaign that was leading up to the war with Iran and what we're seeing now.
Look, we're swimming in disinformation and misinformation. I think everyone sort of realizes that now, that it's hard to believe anything we see online. And we're living in this post-truth era. So absolutely, there is really an onslaught, incessant amount of fire hose of disinformation and misinformation, not just at the nation state level. It's not just coming from our adversaries, it's coming from our own journalists, our own citizens. So absolutely, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation mixed together right now. This is the case. I would just say, for people to understand, this is the status quo, and for people who are working in intelligence and media now, it's really imperative that we actually can try, to the extent possible, to be more patient and diligent in trying to find what is true now, because we're just literally swimming in it.
So then I guess my question for you about that would be, what would the balance be between, trying to shed light on crimes that the regime is committing when they're doing everything in their power to try to hide it? The way that the public speaks about it is what creates pressure to the U.S. government and other international bodies to take action against Iran. So how do we balance that by also ensuring that we're not spreading misinformation, and also ensuring that the appropriate action is going to be taken if it needs to be?
Yeah, I think there is also a huge difference between what is happening in Iran right now and, say, what happened in Gaza the last couple of years in terms of misinformation and getting the truth out. So the Iranians do not have the motive to put out lies. They don't need to put out lies. They're being massacred in the dozens of thousands. We have the videos. This isn't AI. There isn't some kind of AI campaign coming from Iran right now, as there was from Gaza and other places as well. So I would actually say, from a baseline, the level of so-called misinformation or disinformation that may be coming out of Iran is extremely low compared to the other proxy countries, such as Gaza. So I actually, for once, can say that most of what we're seeing coming out appears to be the truth, and that's a horrific truth. And for that reason, as it's dribbling out due to the internet blackout, it is on us. We have the responsibility to push this far and wide, so that, yes, we can push the people in power, not just in the US, not just in Israel, but let's say Europe. They're also doing literally nothing. The UN doing literally nothing. So as this content and these massacres continue to come to light, we need to ironically show the darkness that has taken place over the last 2.5, almost 3 weeks now in Iran.
I mentioned earlier that it's impossible right now to trust anything, that I don't think that any analysis is accurate. I don't think any of the leaked reports of Israel making some request or the U.S. changing its mind, it all just feels like intentionally crafted misinformation, very similar to what we saw leading up to the Iran war, where, the U.S. was very open and willing to be sitting down and having nuclear negotiation talks, and then the very next day, Israel took action and struck. So do you think there's an element of that going on right now?
Yeah, it depends on your level of cynicism. And what I mean by that is, of course, there's what we call strategic deception or propaganda, information operations. We have a slew of lingo for it. And if you want to give the government and the militaries credit, you could say a lot of what we're seeing may be strategic deception. However, I think in this modern day, we don't necessarily need strategic deception because the population is doing it for us. Now, that's uncontrolled because it goes in narratives that the government and the military have less influence over. But for example, the Trump administration, or we could even say the Netanyahu administration, doesn't necessarily need to seed deception out there when the media and people on social media are just actively willingly do it without any necessary seeding of that. So I agree that it's very hard to know what is happening, whether it is official deception or whether it's just our populations and media spreading every headline they possibly can, any shiny object, any AI video that looks real. So yeah, I totally agree with you, but it would be hard for me to disentangle or divorce the actual official strategic deception from what is just organically happening.
I guess you're right. And I guess that's just me being a little bit hopeful that the U.S. is actually, making whatever moves it needs in order to help these protesters. And what I want to ask you, as somebody who has a military background and actually understands what it means to be moving all of these assets in the Middle East right now. We talked about a U.S. aircraft carrier that's been making its way to the Oman Gulf, to the Persian Gulf, and I want to ask you about what does this carrier actually represent? What does it mean? What else is being sent? What specifically is being deployed to the region that is essentially, at the very least, telling Iran, telling the regime, watch your back?
Yeah, and this is where there's a difference between deception and reality. Is we can actually just track, to the degree open source allows us to, we can track real assets moving into position. We don't need to rely on what someone said on social media or what the media said or rumors. We can just count the amount of assets moving into the region, both officially declared and monitored. So yes, the USS Abraham Lincoln redeployed from the South China Sea to, we don't know its exact destination, maybe Gulf of Oman, Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, to the operating area of U.S. Central Command. And in this carrier strike group, and of course it includes an aircraft carrier, it's basically a floating airbase. It has 60 to 7 fixed wing F-35s, F-18s, has aircraft that do early warning, radar, electronic warfare, helicopters. It has everything. And this asset is believed to most likely arrived in its operating area more or less as of yesterday. And we assumed that maybe strikes could happen upon its arrival. Of course, there is some credible reports that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and U.S. Central Command commander is in Israel, so that, at least to me, said that we would not attack, even though the USS Abraham Lincoln arrived, if we have that level of senior officials there. But now we also understand that a second carrier strike group, the USS George H.W. Bush, has departed from Norfolk, Virginia, and is believed to be destined for the Eastern Mediterranean, so just off the coast of Israel and Lebanon. Of course, exact location will be classified. So this aircraft carrier and its carrier strike group has similar capabilities as the USS Abraham Lincoln, has the destroyers, which are additional ships. It's not just an aircraft carrier, it's a slew of ships. And it could arrive, again, depending on its speed, in the next 5 to 10 days. Who knows exactly? But we could expect now a second show of force now on the western side of Iran. So in some sense, there will be kind of a pincer from the Persian Gulf, southeast of Iran, and from the west of Iran. There will be 2 carrier strike groups. And in addition to that, I don't want to get into the numbers, but we've seen dozens of C-17s, C-130s, refuelers, all types of other aircraft in addition to these carrier strike groups be deployed to the Middle East. This is not a joke. This would not happen just to send a signal. I would expect some kind of action to happen because this is insanely expensive and risky to put all of these assets back where they were, let's say, the last couple of years off and on. So who knows whether, and that's good that no one knows, whether or not it will be mostly a defensive posture or whether it will be an offensive posture, and we should expect some fireworks in the next, again, we've been saying this, I understand, the next few days, and it's great, actually, in some sense that we haven't been able to predict when it happens. That's good for the U.S. and potentially Israel as well. Not so great for the Iranian people. But this is the force posture we're seeing. It could be a show of force, but what we know about the Islamic regime is they're determined to continue their nuclear enrichment program. They're determined to continue the ballistic missile program, and they're defiant in calling out the U.S. and the West and painting the Iranian protesters as foreign agents. So President Trump, as we know, said that help is on the way. That's obvious. That's objective. Now, what will happen, of course, remains to be seen, but it is unlikely that we would send effectively a wartime level of assets to the region to just absolutely do nothing and stand on a defensive posture.
Wow. There's so much to think about from everything that you just said. And so I guess I'm curious, do you think that there is a possibility of a genuine strike, not just attacking Iran's nuclear program, but actually trying to topple the regime?
I'll be honest. I wouldn't say I'm literally 50-50 on that, but I'm somewhat skeptical. And the reason for that is really more about domestic politics in the U.S., the political appetite for war, both on the left and the right, the political appetite for regime change, which historically has gone really poorly. Of course, Iran is nothing like the Arab and Muslim countries, so that is a fair distinction to make. And we have our midterm elections next year. So I'm a little bit skeptical on whether or not regime change would be the mission. It could become a mission depending on how things develop. Of course, this is all speculative. So, for example, the U.S., maybe even Israel, could strike some regime targets for their crimes against humanity. This potentially you could paint as a genocide, whether that word makes sense or not. Dozens of thousands of civilians have been killed by whether it's the Besiege or IRGC or security forces. So that now opens up those targets as well as a bank of targets, as we say, not just the ballistic missile sites or the nuclear enrichment sites. There is justification to hit actual regime targets, which, of course, you could say there has always been, but this is new, this is explicit, and I think in some ways the world would be behind it, even if they don't say it publicly. Privately, I think they would support limited U.S. strikes and Israeli strikes on regime targets. I do believe that. Now, again, does that mean we want to go all the way to a regime change? I'm not sure. It's possible that that could be objective or contingency B, C, or D, depending on what happens organically. Because the issue with all types of strikes and potential regime changes is it's just chaos theory. You can't predict the second and third order effects, usually negative ones that might happen that you just didn't know. So I think if we're intelligent about it, we keep that on the table. but maybe that isn't priority number one, especially, to be fair, on sort of short notice of how quickly things developed in Iran the last 2 or 3 weeks. We didn't even have our assets in place, so it's fair to say we were caught somewhat flat-footed on the ability to suddenly affect regime change.
You make very interesting points, and I think I agree for the most part with everything that you're saying. I think that both of us can also agree that it's not really possible for the Iranians by themselves right now to topple this regime. Without military action, they just stand no chance. And so I think I always heard the classic idea that in order to create a revolution, in order to topple the regime, there cannot be foreign intervention. And I believe that in this case, it's just not the case.
Yeah,
it's just absolutely not the case, and that we need, without some form of military intervention, even if it's not, even if the objective isn't regime change, the fact that Iranians would be able to gain some sort of even playing field by the U.S. targeting these regime facilities and so on and so forth makes a huge difference.
So, I totally agree, and there's ways to do that. That, like, whether it's through cyber operations, whether it's through targeting, like the decapitation of the leadership, right? So we would just say the command and control. So you wouldn't necessarily have to destroy the country or kill all the military. If you can effectively dismantle the command and control between the leadership, the IRGC, and all of its other security elements, then it's possible that you create enough chaos that there could be some retreating from places there are weapons, and that could allow civilians to come in and become armed themselves. There's many different ways that this could go down, apart from us airdropping in weapons, which of course we've done in other countries, which is very dangerous and risky as well. So I totally agree. There are many ways that the Iranians could do this themselves, but they need some kind of head start, whether that's through cyber or kinetic, or through dismantling the command and control of the regime somehow. There are many ways that this could happen, and hopefully it can happen, and hopefully happen in the greatest probability and lowest likelihood of civilian casualties. Look, we saw, how quickly Assad fell in Syria. Like, wow, we saw how quickly even the Taliban came and took back over Afghanistan. There can be very quick, somewhat less lethal regime changes, for better or for worse, to be fair. So it's possible, and hopefully the best outcome can happen for the Iranian people.
Yeah, and they already have started compiling a list of what they believe the main targets would be if the U.S. would strike the government and military echelons, as well as we just saw that they started to create a list. The U.S. has started to compile a list of everyone who was in charge of the brutal crackdown against these protesters. So there's some kind of accountability list, and I would say maybe eventually Nuremberg trials situation that are being put in the works, which I think is smart, whether this regime is toppled soon or not. I want to ask one last question, which is for those of us that are clinging on to the news